With one brutal strike, the monster shattered his defense, sending him coughing blood into the air. She unleashed her ultimate skill, flame bombardment, turning the dark alley into a roaring inferno of magic. Because when Yoo Jaryong stripped off his shirt and flared his mana, I realized he relied entirely on expensive gear rather than actual combat skill. With a burst of blinding flames, he drove his blazing fist straight into the monster's strike. The school bell rang, ending another grueling exam day at Soldier High School. My classmates were already complaining about how impossible the test was, laughing off their terrible guesses. Outside, heavy military vehicles rolled down the streets, a reminder that our world was no longer normal. It all started with the adhesion phenomenon, when another ruined dimension forcefully fused with Earth. Group of girls stood by the curb, whispering excitedly as the convoy passed. The collision ripped open danger zones, pouring nightmare creatures into our cities. To fight back and reclaim our land, humanity raised elite adventurers. The skies turned blood red as the dimensional rift tore the atmosphere apart. Terrified citizens watched in horror as fire and destruction engulfed the city grid. Then, monstrous horned horrors emerged from the dark, glowing with lethal intent. Massive dimensional rifts tore open the sky, spilling nightmare beasts into our world. Colossal monsters crushed skyscrapers beneath their claws, while horrified citizens looked on. It took scientists years to finally understand what had triggered the cataclysm. Across the universe, another planet identical to Earth once existed quietly, until an unknown disaster struck its core, triggering a massive cosmic explosion. In an instant, that entire alien world was ripped into pieces. The burning planetary fragments turned into a deadly meteor shower, rushing through the void. And those flying remnants were headed directly on a collision course with Earth. On the streets below, people froze in absolute horror as the sky began to fall. Someone pointed into the blazing air, and everyone knew life as we knew it was over. Then the impossible happened. Our world collided and fused with theirs. A colossal alien tree burst through the skyline, ripping apart our city. They called it the adhesion phenomenon, an invasion of broken alien laws and nightmare beasts. Monstrous, multi-headed serpents erupted from the ground, tearing through fleeing civilians. In an instant, nearly a fifth of the entire planet was completely lost. Humanity lost control of the land, forced to retreat behind fortified borders. Those ruined territories became known as the danger zone. A soldier panted in the dark, surrounded by the embers of a lost battle. He turned his head, and his eyes went wide with pure terror. Stepping out of the inferno was a horned horror, dragging a dead soldier by the neck. A single horned horror, a creature built purely for slaughter with stats far outclassing any normal military force. A soldier peeked around the corner, his jaw tight as terror gripped his heart. The beast unleashed a deafening roar, and the soldier panicked, unloading his rifle in a desperate spray. Bullets did nothing. It lunged forward, closing the distance in a fraction of a second. With one brutal strike, the monster shattered his defense, sending him coughing blood into the air. He collapsed against the shattered wall, completely broken and lifeless. Humanity was caught entirely off guard, given zero time to prepare for monsters of this scale. Even a trained soldier barely scraped D-rank stats across the board. Against creatures like this, regular humans were utterly helpless. The horned horror towered over its fallen prey, a reminder of our absolute weakness back then. A horned horror lunges from the dark, ready to slaughter another helpless soldier. But the portal didn't just dump monstrous horrors into our world. In that final desperate moment, glowing blue energy surged through the soldier's fist as he threw a counterpunch. Deep inside humanity's core, unseen chains holding our true power back suddenly began to bind us in the cosmos. Every human is born locked behind strict biological limitations. Yet here, a solitary man caught the giant beasts crushing claw midair with his bare hands. The absolute laws governing Earth's weak species were being rewritten right before our eyes. He grinned through the blood as his strength stat forcibly pushed past normal human limits into rank B. The ancient cosmic restraints couldn't hold back the awakening energy any longer. And with a deafening shatter, the heavy iron chains snapped completely, unleashing humanity's true potential. A lone soldier stood against a towering monster, channeling everything he had into one desperate strike. The impact slammed the beast straight into the dirt, shattering the ground beneath them. He caught his breath over the fallen creature, the surrounding air heavy with smoke and lingering aura. Although this global awakening affected every single person on the planet, the actual power that surged through each individual was completely different. Some people immediately pushed their bodies past human limits, training relentlessly to harness every drop of power. The chosen few made the choice to refine their gifts. They mastered their newfound abilities, ready to stand against the tide. Hordes of horned horrors continued to swarm out of the spatial rifts, threatening to wipe us out. And so, humanity formed a new front line, the adventurers, to reclaim our world. Stepping onto the front lines, warriors stood tall against the endless dark. They took up arms to defend what was left, earning a simple title. Humanity clashed violently with the invading monsters in a desperate struggle for survival. That brutal conflict marked the dawn of a whole new era. Surrounded by slaughter, a handful of survivors looked out over the ruined city. I stood among the blood and ash, knowing our world would never be the same. To ensure our survival, specialized institutions began rising across the globe. Korea built its own premier facility to train the next generation of fighters. For 25 years, it produced the strongest combatants in the country. Elite shadows gathered before the Grand Academy, setting high standards for everyone inside. It was none other than the legendary Soldier High School. Around here, even surviving a real dungeon counts toward your grade point average. Students were just standing around casually chatting about their upcoming exams, until a deafening scream echoed across the entire courtyard, stopping everyone in their tracks. And there he was, lounging on a bench like he owned the entire academy. The guys nearby could only glare, utterly disgusted by the absurdity of the scene. He just offered a smooth, effortless smile right back at them. D.F. Choi, 17 years old, first-year prodigy, and already a 14-time dungeon survivor. While the idol walked away with his fan club, I brushed past the noise without giving them a second glance. I checked my phone, another unpaid hospital bill warning, reminding me why I couldn't afford to waste time here. My classmate clenched his fist in frustration, completely powerless to stop what was happening. I just raised a hand, walking away and promising to settle things next week. The spectator could only stare in shock at his fallen friend, groaning on the pavement. Every drop of blood I spilled was for my sick father lying helpless in that hospital bed. The darkness of reality hit hard, leaving no room for excuses or hesitation. I hardened my gaze, locking in on what needed to be done. My phone chimed with another overdue hospital bill notification, followed right by a text from my broker calling me to work.
Meanwhile, D.F. Choi was busy soaking in the adoration of his screaming fan club like a true idol.
Leaving the noise of the school behind, I headed straight down the empty street toward Bangcheon. Behind me, D.F. Choi's friend wondered aloud if I had somehow crossed the school star. I brushed off the weird feeling and kept walking, convincing myself I was just imagining things. My destination was Bangcheon, a derelict, danger-filled zone left abandoned after the fusion. Ducking under the warning tape, I slipped down into the ruined subway entrance. I kept my head down and stayed alert as I descended into the underground darkness. Down in the shadows, my broker I am Yihun was already waiting to present today's deal.
Believe it or not, this kid right here is our absolute best operative.
Are you insane? You expect me to work with a literal child? Get this damn brat out of my sight before I lose my mind.
Lee Pilju kept blowing his top, backed up by a towering musclehead who thought he was intimidating. I just looked at the big guy and deadpanned, why he was taking orders from a senile old man. Lee Pil-gyu stood frozen, his eyes widening in complete shock as he realized who he was actually dealing with. He flexed his massive fists, green aura flaring up around his body as he tried to flex his 80s-level dungeon record. Yi-won just stood back and took a slow drag from his cigarette, completely unbothered by the growing tension. I opened my mouth and spoke with absolute calmness, cutting through all their grandstanding. Blue aura erupted around Misi reminded them of my real record. 371 illegal dungeon returns. Subscribe to see what happens next in the story. Every rookie hunter starts out with grand dreams of stepping into a dungeon and conquering it like a hero. They expect to face down terrifying beasts with sheer bravery and come out victorious. And when they finally slay the boss, they dream of swimming in piles of high-rank loot. But then reality hits, in the form of an underground broker like Yi-won showing up to claim his cut. The broker immediately appraises the monster parts and high-value materials dropped by the boss. He tallies up every single item on his screen, calculating fees for illegal dungeon access and processing. By the time he finishes deducting his huge commissions, the actual raiders are left crying over pennies. Because in the illegal underground market, dark shadows are always watching to exploit desperate hunters. They whisper in your ear, promising easy money while quietly setting up the trap. And while veterans like Lee Pil-gyu think they control the game, guys like Yi-won pull all the strings from behind the curtain. Stealing from the guild was a rookie mistake, but running through our territory made it a death sentence. He thought he was clever, until he ended up in zip ties before even hitting the main road. I just sat back and lit a cigarette, letting the chaos play out around me. Yi-won suddenly loomed over my shoulder, looking completely panicked. I took a slow drag and glanced up, wondering why he was sweating over a simple raid.
Are you getting cold feet now? You're the one who should be terrified. That guy has a violent temper.
He pointed right at Lee Pil-gyu, who was actively choking out another adventurer like a ragdoll. So he was an actual criminal, not that I was in any position to judge. Lee Pil-gyu flared his green aura and stepped up to him, towering like a wall of solid muscle. I looked him dead in the eye, completely unimpressed. I just looked back at him with a wide grin, completely unfazed by his threats.
Hey, crazy bastard.
Lee Pil-gyu threw a heavy, aura-infused punch straight at my face. He put everything into the swing, expecting to crack my skull wide open.
Huh.
His fist hit nothing but air, grazing past my cheek while my aura flared to life. Before he could recover, I pivoted on my heel and swung my leg around. My foot slammed directly into his jaw with explosive force, shattering his reinforced armor instantly. The veteran's eyes bulged in absolute horror as the heel of my shoe broke his face. I turned away quietly, leaving him to realize just who he was dealing with.
Yi-won just casually puffed his cigarette, looking at the stunned broker like he'd told him so all along. He couldn't resist bragging that he'd brought in the absolute best operative for the job.
I kept my cool, blue energy swirling around. Misi waited for his next move.
Lee Pil-gyu clutched his bruised jaw, stammering in sheer disbelief at what had just happened.
He replayed the moment in his head, how easily I'd slipped past his fist, and the terrifying amount of raw power behind the kick to his chin. The rest of the group watched in dead silence, sweat dripping down their faces. Realizing his pride was on the line, Pil-gyu's frustration boiled completely over. He clenched his fist, surging green aura into every muscle in his body. With a roar, he ripped off his shirt as his full enhancement skills flared to life. Yi-won casually took a drag from his cigarette, leaving the onlookers completely speechless.
Seething in humiliation, Lee Pil-gyu channeled green aura throughout his bare upper body. He raised his fists, screaming that he would make me regret ever stepping into this dungeon.
Ever since the adhesion event changed our world, the hierarchy of power became everything. Humanity unlocked strange new powers, breaking past their natural physical limits. certain individuals awakened abilities that defied normal comprehension. Every person developed distinct talents, latent traits, and specialized combat builds. Adventurers honed those unique traits, choosing weapons and roles that fit their style best.
Lee Pilgyu stacked 3 heavy enhancement chants at once, swelling into a literal mountain of muscle. Exhaling heavy trails of steam, he glared down at me like a butcher ready to strike.
He charged at me like a massive, red aura beast, intending to squash me under sheer brute force. He even conjured a glowing purple shield, boasting that a kid could never break a professional's defense. To be fair, his incoming attack really did feel like an entire fleet dropping heavy artillery all at once. The whole place detonated as he slammed down with maximum force. I just stood my ground, channeling my blue aura to read his exact path. He flexed his massive glowing green physique right in front of me, thinking he had me trapped. Then I moved, stepping straight into his strike zone and driving a lightning-fast kick into his core. The shockwave shattered his iron skin on impact, raising a thick cloud of dust.
H.H. E.K.
Broker I am Yiwen casually hoisted Lee Pilgyu up by his collar, dangling the beaten veteran in the air like a discarded toy.
What a useless punk.
Lee Pilgyu refused to accept it, flaring his green aura once again to challenge me in the middle of the ruined underground hall. I grounded my stance, letting my blue aura surge violently around Misi, prepared for his next charge. I locked eyes with him, narrowing my focus until everything else in the subterranean room faded away. He hurled a massive, aura-infused punch straight at my face, tearing through the air with lethal force.
What's wrong, kid? Can't handle real power.
I dipped beneath his wild swing, landing low in a clean, balanced crouching posture on the shattered concrete floor. His defense was wide open, and I already knew exactly where to strike. Watching from the sidelines, I am Yiwen tapped Lee Pilgyu's shoulder, quietly acknowledging that my reflexes were far beyond a normal student's. Lee Pilgyu flexed his expanded muscles, radiant green aura flaring as he bragged that a hit from him carried the force of a runaway truck. Off to the side, Broker I am Yiwen lost his patience and yelled for his veteran to hurry up and wrap this beatdown up. I could only sigh in annoyance at how completely out of touch their broker really was.
Towering over me, Lee Pilgyu taunted that my broker clearly had no idea what kind of professional monster he was dealing with. He sneered that a kid's cheap tricks could never break a veteran's defense, but I just smiled back.
Without missing a beat, I reached down and picked up a simple metal pipe lying on the dusty floor. I stood my ground, casually balancing the pipe in front of his looming, buffed-up frame. I hoisted the metal bar over my shoulder with total calm. As Lee Pilgyu charged forward, I decided this basic pipe would be more than enough to shatter his pride. He lunged with full physical power, green lightning cracking around his bared teeth. I am Yiwen stood back calmly smoking a cigarette, while the broker beside him was practically trembling, assuming I was about to get crushed. Lee Pilgyu charged forward like a wild beast, but I simply stepped into his guard, channeling blue aura through my metal pipe. He grit his teeth, glowing green with full physical buff skills, convinced his defense was completely impenetrable. I didn't flinch for a second, keeping my eyes fixed directly on his exposed flank. As he lunged from above with crushing force, I swung the pipe in a clean, high-speed arc. The violent collision shattered the surrounding air as our energies clashed head-on. A massive surge of blue shockwaves completely tore through his reinforced armor skills. The impact instantly blew past his defenses, causing Lee Pilgyu to spit blood as his eyes rolled back. I followed through smoothly, landing on the ground without a single scratch on me. I am Yiwen took a slow puff of his cigarette like he expected it all along, while the onlooker nearly lost his mind in shock.
He collapsed to his knees, his voice trembling as he gasped, "Where on earth? Did you learn to fight like that?"
I didn't bother answering, just stood over him as he slumped onto his back, completely broken. Brushing my hair back, I sighed softly, it really didn't take much to shatter his entire ego. He stared at me silhouette, realizing the staggering difference in our strength. In this world, adventurers are strictly divided from gemstone up to silver and gold, but ranks mean nothing against real experience. And this was just the beginning of my run. When I was just a kid, I remember sneaking through the quiet, wooden hallways of our home. I would tread softly against the sliding paper doors, listening closely to the quiet around me. Out in the courtyard, a lone warrior stood with a long spear, silhouetted against the open sky. His name was Yoo Seong. Back during the dawn of the cataclysm, young soldiers were thrust into combat with standard rifles and zero preparation. They had no modern skills or guidebooks when monstrous horrors suddenly materialized in front of them. Through brutal trial and error, frontline squads fought tooth and nail to learn how to survive. Yoo Seong stood at the pinnacle of those first-generation pioneers, paving the path all modern adventurers walk today. For those who didn't live through that era, it's easy to look back and view it as just a heroic legend. But for the ones who bled in those ruins, it wasn't a hero story. It was pure, unadulterated survival. Row after row of white sheets covered the fallen across the shattered streets, a grim reminder of what humanity paid just to survive. For the pioneers who stepped into the unknown back then, it wasn't a heroic fantasy. It was pure, unadulterated hell. They had no guidebooks, no database, and zero intel on what was waiting for them down in the dark. Armed with primitive gear and sheer nerve, early adventurers stepped blindly into cavernous depths. Without warning, giant, ring-mouthed horrors like adolescent geckemuleths burst from the shadows. Monsters that we now treat as routine targets in training manuals. Unleashed blinding blasts of toxic green energy directly into the ranks of unprepared men. The force of the blast tore through defenses, scattering frontline soldiers like autumn leaves. Terrified screams echoed through the dark as men realized their weapons couldn't even scratch the beast. To those first-generation fighters, every encounter was an unpredictable, living calamity. Through the suffocating darkness, glowing eyes locked onto the front lines. In those dark early years, fighters stood utterly defenseless, without a single specialized skill to aid them. Even heavy titanium alloy weapons dissolved like ice under the monster's corrosive acidic spit. And none of the enhanced items we take for granted today even existed yet. They had to face massive, venomous leviathans armed with nothing but raw steel and desperation. Surviving under such hopeless conditions seemed almost impossible. Yet pioneer fighters grit their teeth and grip their weapons tighter anyway. They threw themselves directly into the chaos, pushing past human limits. That first generation bled for every inch of progress, building our survival on brutal trial and error. And their sacrifices carved out the open roads and modern dungeons we walk today. In those early days, pioneers charged blindly into dark tunnels with nothing but desperate courage. Without skills or basic tactical info, confronting an adolescent geckemuleth meant sheer, suffocating terror. They bought every scrap of combat knowledge, with blood, slumping exhausted beside slain abominations. Yet the rare survivors carried those brutal lessons forward to pave the path for future generations. Standing tall over fallen horrors, they turned raw survival into an art form. Through those impossible trials, their names were etched forever as true legends. And above all others stood a man whose terrifying resolve redefined humanity's limits. Yoo Seong, Asia's premier hero, who forged the modern era of adventuring out of chaos. He didn't just endure the calamity, he conquered it, setting the absolute standard for all who followed. Earning his place as the first human history had ever seen to slay a dragon. Every broadcast screen in the city went dark as humanity watched the living legend in absolute disbelief. The ultimate hero of our era, Asia's former #1 adventurer. Yoo Seong channeled a colossal surge of blue energy right into his heavy staff. He swung the glowing weapon, unleashing a massive shockwave that shook the entire mountain. Yoo Seong exhaled calmly, his terrifying aura settling back into his body. The young boy watching from the side stood frozen in absolute terror. Blood suddenly spilled from Yoo Seong's mouth as his internal injuries caught up to him. The terrified boy sprinted forward toward his fallen master. Yoo Seong collapsed to one knee, leaning heavily on his spear to keep from falling completely. Tears streamed down my face as I stood there, helpless, watching the man who had felt invincible broken before my eyes. Yoo Seong lay motionless in that hospital bed, his body ravaged by the lethal aftermath of his final fight. Even through the agony, he forced a quiet smile and gently patted my head, trying to reassure me that everything would be all right. But the damage was far too severe, and suddenly he collapsed forward, coughing a violent wave of blood onto the white sheets. His internal organs were failing from the toxic dragon energy, tearing his body apart from the inside out. That was when shadowy officials from the association visited his hospital room in secret. Without a hint of gratitude, they handed over a formal notice sealing his fate behind closed doors. Reading the cold demands on that paper, Asia's greatest dragon slayer looked on in sheer horror and disbelief. Left alone in the dark, the man who saved humanity buried his head in his hands, completely abandoned by the system. When I walked back into that room wearing my school uniform, I realized the world of heroes was far darker than I ever imagined. Yoo Seong sat alone in his hospital room, staring silently out the window at a sky he once protected. Hearing my footsteps, the old dragon slayer turned his hollow, scarred face toward me. I stood there, looking down at the broken legend without saying a single word. Back in the dungeon, Lee Piljiu lay trembling helplessly on the cold floor behind me while I held my pipe. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling nothing but pity for the beaten veteran. With a casual flick of my wrist, I tossed the metal pipe aside, letting it clatter onto the concrete. I Am Yiwon stood stunned alongside his associate, completely speechless at how fast it ended. I Am Yiwon's jaw dropped as he tried to process a silver rank veteran getting crushed by a high schooler. The gray-haired man reached for a cigarette, casually noting that Piljiu was never much of a real fighter anyway. I slung my jacket over my shoulder and walked off, knowing guys who brag about beating up amateurs are always the weakest link. Looking at the broker standing in front of me, I made my position crystal clear. We couldn't keep going like this. I gestured back toward the unconscious veteran on the floor and told Am Yiwon flat out that it was better to just fire him. Out cold on the hard concrete floor, Lee Piljiu lay bleeding from his mouth with his eyes completely rolled back. Before I Am Yiwon could even argue, a gray-haired operative casually slung an arm over the broker's shoulder. The sudden physical contact caught Am Yiwon completely off guard, making him snap around in frustration. The gray-haired veteran just flashed a calm, knowing smile right in the broker's face. I Am Yiwon swallowed hard, instantly realizing that arguing with seasoned fighters here was a terrible idea. Sweat dripping down his forehead, he quickly forced an awkward, nervous grin to save face. Leaving the mess behind, someone took a seat across the room to rest while the dust settled. Taking a cool sip from a water bottle, I paused mid-drink when another unfamiliar name suddenly crossed the conversation. I practically choked on my drink, spraying water everywhere at the sheer absurdity of what I was hearing. Wiping my mouth with my sleeve, I struggled to process the intelligence dropping right in front of me. The ruins of the urban sector were overgrown and infested, hiding massive nest structures beneath the skyline. The veteran took a slow drag from his cigarette, his eyes narrowing as he laid out the harsh reality. I froze, my mind racing as the full scale of the operation began to sink in. Meanwhile, across the room, Lee Piljiu was getting repeatedly stomped while lying flat on the floor. Yesterday, the military had secretly mobilized heavy artillery for an unpublicized high-level assault. 7 top-tier adventurers deployed all at once. Usually, just 2 of those legends in the same room sends the press into a complete frenzy. They had been sent on a total eradication mission to wipe out an entire dragon's nest. A single spark of golden energy gathered in the dark, shining like the last piece of hope in a ruined world. Yi just stared at me blankly, completely baffled when I asked if the monster extract was supposed to look like actual jelly. I pinched the bridge of my nose and let out a heavy sigh, trying to process the absolute mess I just stepped into. Suddenly, a sharp tremor echoed through the ground, freezing me in place as my eyes widened in pure instinct. To legally clear dungeons without an official rank, you need a gemstone temporary license, and the association guards that permission like gold. Which meant surviving this raid meant playing by their strict rules, no matter how dirty the dungeon got. I found myself standing in a ruined, quiet low-rank dungeon zone deep beneath Seoul. A chilling gust of wind swept through the dark tunnel, signaling trouble. Yi stood beside me, exuding his usual calm demeanor as he managed the illegal run. A massive sealed door loomed ahead, covered in glowing blood-red runes. He raised his hand, channeling magic right onto the heavy seal. Blue energy flared wildly across the entrance, unsealing the path ahead. The heavy magic slowly dissipated into tiny lingering specks of light. The air grew quiet as the ancient barrier finally yielded. I adjusted my mask and geared up, ready to step into the dangerous zone alone.
I know I tell you this every single time, but make sure you don't die out there.
I kept my eyes down as Yi gave me his usual stern warning to stay alive. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, watching me gear up for the run.
Are you still looking for that specific item? The legendary medicine, rumored to bring back the dead.
I turned toward the dungeon entrance, knowing those rumors were always blown out of proportion. I pressed my hand against the cold, sealed gate. Even if an antidote like that actually existed in this world, it still wouldn't be enough to cure my father's condition. Miracles like that simply aren't real. Stepping through, the vast expanse of the ruined Boromir zone opened up right below me. I shielded my eyes, peering into the gloom as the familiar chill of the dungeon settled over me. Ever since the adhesion, dangerous zones like this had torn through the planet without warning. And right here in Korea, the concentration of active sectors was higher than almost anywhere else. Ruptures flared like active volcanoes, spewing chaos into areas meant to be safe. I pulled my goggles down, adjusting my gear for what was coming. Below me lay the ruined expanse of Boromir, a former low-rank zone that should have been an easy walk. The map outlined the territory clearly, marking the boundaries of the corrupted sectors.
An exploration team lost a man near the Uedo border, but he managed to carry the target item back to Boromir. He went radio silent right after reaching the rendezvous point, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Whatever took him out, your job is simple. Get in, grab that sky wasp stinger and get out.
Yi adjusted my goggles, making sure I was completely ready before I stepped into the unknown.
Focus on the job for now.
I pulled my mask up, letting out a dry chuckle, as if he'd ever be stupid enough to cross him.
You're not that stupid to do that.
He locked eyes with me one last time and gave me a firm order. Be really careful. Sky wasp royal jelly is immensely precious, and everyone knows its value. Humans aren't the only ones willing to throw away their lives just to get their hands on it. The rope snapped taut as I descended deeper into the dense, isolated forest zone. I dropped silently onto the damp soil, surrounded by towering, ancient trees. Looking up into the thick canopy, a strange green glow illuminated the entire sky above me. Then I saw him, a panicked adventurer, gasping for breath through his mask while looking up in pure horror. Right beside him in the soil was a footprint so massive it defied everything I knew about low-rank dungeons. A deafening roar split the open sky, scattering birds across the horizon. The entire canopy shook as flocks of birds fled the mountain in a frantic frenzy. Another scout was sprinting through the dense brush, huffing desperately as her heart hammered in her chest. She slammed her hand against a massive tree trunk, desperately trying to catch her balance. Pressing herself flat against the bark, she clamped both hands over her mouth, terrified that even her breathing would give her away. Another thundering step shook the earth, her eyes dilating in sheer terror. She cautiously peeked around the massive trunk, praying the nightmare hadn't spotted her. Closing her eyes, she prayed the towering shadow passing overhead would just keep moving. She froze in her tracks, her voice trembling as she stared up at the impossible shadow looming right in front of her. A mountain of high-rank monster materials flashed through her mind, a fortune big enough to change anyone's life. But reality slapped her hard. This zone was only supposed to be rated D+. She cupped her trembling hands, trying to steady her breathing as terror threatened to completely paralyze her. Then a giant, grotesquely grinning titan ape peered right over the trunk, smiling down at her like a predator finding its prey. Her eyes widened in sheer panic as the beast stared straight down into her soul. Without thinking twice, she leaped backward and unleashed a blazing magical attack straight upward into the monster's face. She stumbled back, trembling uncontrollably as she realized her strike didn't leave a single scratch. Gritting her teeth through the absolute despair, she refused to go down without a fight. Knocking 3 arrows at once, she drew her bow string back with everything she had left. A grinning, muscular face loomed through the trees, its lifeless eyes locked right onto her. It was a juvenile titan ape, a 3-star threat that had no business being in a low-rank zone. She released 3 fully charged arrows at once, letting them slice straight through the air. The beast raised a single hand, and the heavy arrowheads bounced off its palm like tiny toothpicks. It slowly lowered its fist, peering over its hand with terrifying, deadpan indifference. Cold dread washed over her face as she realized her absolute strongest attack didn't even leave a scratch. Towering high above the canopy, the giant pulled back a fist big enough to flatten a house. It brought the punch down with raw, seismic force, shattering the terrain into fine dust. Jumping backward into the air, she desperately drew another volley, knowing full well her bows were completely useless. The violent air pressure blew her off balance mid-flight, tossing her backward into the gloom. My arrow struck the titan ape's chest full force, only to shatter against its rock-hard hide without leaving a single scratch. She knew standard attacks wouldn't even dent a 3-star monster. The beast grinned with grotesque malice, completely unfazed by her desperate salvo as it closed the distance. With trembling hands, she notched her final arrow and drew the bowstring tight. She waited for the monster to drop its guard, knowing this single shot was her last hope. A powerful fiery aura suddenly erupted around her as she poured every drop of her mana into the weapon. She firmly planted her foot on the cracked pavement, stabilizing her stance against the intense recoil. With her eyes blazing with resolve, she aimed directly at the towering beast's core. She unleashed her ultimate skill, Flame Bombardment, turning the dark alley into a roaring inferno of magic. 3 elemental arrows hovered in the night air, waiting to decide whether she would live or die. A single blazing arrow arced through the sky, cutting through the shadows like a flare. It detonated in a massive column of fire, lighting up the entire forest zone. She turned around, expecting to see a burning corpse. Instead, her eyes widened in complete disbelief as the smoke cleared. The titan ape had leaped clear over the blast, dropping down from above like a mountain. Panicking, she realized the beast had read her attack before she even released the string. With her ultimate skill wasted and her mana depleted, only one thought remained in her mind. She tried to turn, but the giant beast was already standing right over her. It charged forward with terrifying speed, crushing the ground beneath its weight. As it closed in to crush her, I knew I couldn't just watch from the shadows anymore. Her eyes went wide with pure horror as the massive creature bore down on her, completely unbothered by her strongest attack. The titan ape leapt high into the air, its shadow enveloping her completely as it prepared to bring its crushing mass down. I slid out from the shadows and planted my staff into the dirt, stepping right into its landing zone. She froze in complete shock, staring at me like she couldn't believe anyone was crazy enough to stand between her and death. Bronze class adventurers were technically allowed inside low-rank dungeons, but nobody ever expected a monster like this to walk among them. And that was precisely why someone like me had to do the job. I adjusted my mask and gripped my staff, stepping straight into the path of the giant beast. The surviving adventurer gaped in total disbelief, unable to comprehend someone charging the monster head-on. The Titan ape let out a deafening roar, its massive jaws snapping as it smashed into the ground. I planted my feet hard against the turf, absorbing the shockwave as the dust erupted around me. Heavy breathing filled my chest as I caught my breath and locked eyes with the towering threat. The monster charged again without taking a scratch. My basic physical attacks were barely making a dent. Realizing sheer force wouldn't work, I reached down toward my belt pocket. My fingers pulled out a small ignition tool I always kept for backup. Holding the device alongside my staff, I rapidly calculated a new strategy. I launched myself into the air with a swift acrobatic flip, repositioning right above the monster's line of sight. The surviving caster watched in utter disbelief as I charged straight ahead. She screamed that a frontal attack was suicide, and I was as good as dead. "Close your eyes," I yelled, rushing forward with my flash device primed. She flinched in surprise, barely reacting in time to my sudden order. I launched into the air, flying straight into the massive beast's line of sight. With point-blank alignment secured, I aimed the flash emitter right between its eyes. Squeezing my eyes shut tight, I triggered the device. A blinding flash of white light erupted, washing out the entire cavern. The intense radiance forced the caster to cover her face in pain. Stunned and completely blinded, the Titan ape roared in sudden agony. The intense flash hit the Titan ape square in the face, sending the massive beast into a roaring frenzy of total pain. I landed cleanly on the forest floor before the giant could even recover its senses. Looking down at the empty cylinder in my hand, I sighed. That flash device was my very last one. It was a specialized stunning torch, engineered specifically to temporarily blind high-rank monsters. Much like a deep-sea predator using light to paralyze its target, the shock totally disoriented the ape. The giant ape clutched its blinding eyes, howling in helpless pain as the light burned through its retinas. I calmly adjusted my protective goggles, keeping my eyes fixed on the monster's flailing silhouette. Nearby, the elf-eared caster was still wincing, slowly rubbing her eyes after catching the stray glare. I slung my staff over my shoulder and walked right up behind her to lay out my proposal. Without wasting a single second, I charged back into the fight to strike while the Titan was still blind. I locked my sights on the target, adjusting my goggles as I prepared for impact. Everything went dark for a split second as the shockwave washed over us. Back at the office, Yi Hun used to remind me that guys in our line of work survive purely like cockroaches. He takes a slow drag from his cigarette, casually pointing out how lucrative illegal smuggler bounties can be. I cut through the thick dust cloud, keeping low to maintain my momentum. Glancing over my shoulder, I checked if the surviving caster was keeping up. Suddenly, a surge of magic caught me completely off guard. High above the canopy, the elf caster leapt through the air with her bow ready. Out of breath and desperate, she sprinted forward while trying to gather her remaining magic. She channeled her spell right onto my weapon, gasping in shock as the energy took hold. Before she could even process what was happening, I vanished right out of her line of sight. She blinked in total disbelief, completely bewildered by how quickly I'd moved. I swept in fast, grabbing her weapon and pinning her before she could even react. I leaned in close and called out her reckless foolishness for charging in without a plan. I held her firmly to the ground, shutting down any thought she had of running away. Out of breath and staring up at me, she could only gasp in utter surprise. I looked down at her deadpan, letting her know I wasn't here to play hero for free. I made it clear I knew exactly who she was, an illegal smuggler with a heavy bounty on her head. I shifted my gaze toward the Titan ape, keeping track of the massive threat still looming over us. With time running short, my eyes narrowed as I prepared to strike the final blow. I caught a quick glimpse of the mark branded on her uniform, the unmistakable crest of an illegal smuggler. She froze instantly, staring at me in total shock with my staff leveled right at her throat. I turned away, letting her know I had zero patience for dealing with another spoiled silver spoon adventurer. She went completely quiet, processing the fact that her secret was out. I casually reminded her that the government pays a cool 50 million won bounty for capturing smugglers like her. The heavy silence stretched between Yoo waited for her response. Then she blurted out a proposition so bizarre it actually made me pause. She produced a glowing, high-tier artifact necklace worth way more than any bounty. Dangling the priceless treasure, she promised to hand it over if I helped her pass her high school midterms. I stared at her deadpan. Fighting a Titan ape was one thing, but tutoring a crazy rich smuggler was definitely not in my job description. She scoffed, defensively insisting it didn't matter whether she was crazy or not. Smirking, she held up a glowing blue amulet, claiming this single artifact could change my entire life. I let out a low breath, casually reminding her I never actually intended to kill her. She flinched back in utter confusion, completely thrown off by my sudden change in tone. Standing my ground with staff in hand, I reminded her that our time was already up. Right on cue, the colossal Titan ape plunged from above with glowing red eyes fixed straight on us. The beast smashed into the ground, triggering a massive shockwave across the clearing. Her eyes widened in absolute terror as the force of the monster's arrival hit us. Before she could panic, I thrust my weapon straight toward her in a swift motion. I shouted at her to channel every drop of her remaining magic right onto the tip of my staff. I reminded her of the massive spell she had unleashed earlier, calling out over the chaos. I ordered her to channel that exact same magical blast directly into the tip of my staff. I locked eyes with her, making it clear that my patience was running out fast. I warned her that I couldn't draw the beast's aggression empty-handed for much longer, as the giant monster loomed over us. She panicked, gripping my weapon tightly as glowing fire, magic began to surge around her hands. Her eyes widened in absolute dread as she realized she barely had a quarter of her mana left. The Titan ape charged forward, its massive footfalls shaking the ground while she doubted her remaining power. She squeezed her eyes shut in sheer terror, completely overwhelmed by the monster's force. While she hesitated, I darted forward, throwing myself directly into harm's way to lock the monster's attention onto me. I glanced back at her, keeping my eyes locked on the battle line while my mind calculated the next move. Catching the spell midway, I caught her magic blast straight onto the tip of my staff with single-minded precision. Vaulting over the giant beast, I looked at the pathetic flame and couldn't help feeling severely unimpressed. I let out a deadpan breath, reminding her that this pathetic spark was barely a quarter of her original output. The compressed flame crackled around the weapon tip, sharpening into a razor-thin crescent of raw power. Still, I smirked. Even a weak spell would do just fine when handled by someone who actually knows how to use it. I charged straight beneath the Titan ape's massive frame before it could process my sudden angle of attack. Because when you're taking down a high-tier monster, sheer brute force isn't what matters most. It all comes down to an absolute sense of timing, and driving the strike directly into the exact spot that kills it. The survivor could only stare in utter disbelief as my thrown staff pierced the air. The compressed flame detonated right against the ape's chest with explosive force. The creature let out a silent roar of pain as the thermal energy tore straight through its throat. My cracked glasses fell away as I landed smoothly, leaving the monster completely neutralized. That is the real standard of a silver rank adventurer, not just surviving 50 dungeons, but knowing how to finish the fight. And in a place like this, proper execution is the only thing that separates a survivor from a corpse. As a child, Jin Saerom ran alongside her schoolmates, oblivious to the world outside. She stopped mid-stride, turning back toward the waiting street. A sleek black luxury sedan sat parked at the curb, an attendant standing motionless beside it.
She offered a cheerful wave to her classmates before leaving.
Her friends murmured in envy as she stepped into the vehicle. In her world, wealth promised that almost anything she desired was well within reach. She sat quietly in the backseat, watching the city pass by. Whatever caught her eye, her family's fortune could easily secure. Reflected in her young eyes was the towering headquarters of her family's empire. The Jin Saerom Group, one of the most powerful corporate titans in South Korea. Her father, the corporate heir, had chosen to marry an elf straight out of the otherworld. And the child born from that union was Jin Saerom. Growing up, she held a deep, unshakable respect for adventurers. More than anything else in the world, she dreamed of becoming one of them. Her instructor didn't mince words, flatly telling her it was a pipe dream. He claimed her elf blood was far too diluted, making her no different from an ordinary human. He turned to her father, questioning why he kept encouraging her instead of steering her toward reality.
I'm not forcing her into anything. I'm supporting her because this is her dream.
Her father argued that elven talent wasn't a strict requirement, forcing the trainer to reluctantly concede. Still, the trainer admitted under his breath that for a human baseline, her effort wasn't terrible. Even after pushing herself past every limit, Jin Saerom was still barely scratching above average. Her instructor turned back to her father, refusing to soften the cold reality.
Jin Saerom stood his ground, unwilling to let anyone write off his daughter's resolve.
She collapsed onto the gymnasium floor, gasping for breath but refusing to stop. The trainer noted with a subtle smirk that her stubbornness was a trait she shared with her mother's bloodline. He bluntly warned that no matter how hard she trained, she would never match the true monsters of this world. Silhouettes of legendary first-generation heroes stood tall against the starlit horizon, unreachable giants like Yoo Seong. Yet beneath the single spotlight in an empty hall, Saerom gripped her bow with trembling hands. Her instructor admitted that if she kept trying, she might at least become decent.
Back in the present, Saerom wiped the sweat from her chin, still catching her breath from our brutal fight.
Sure, that kind of basic effort might earn applause for a regular human who works hard. But her bloodline granted her privileges far beyond what her mediocre talent deserved. Wealth, influence, noble blood. All those advantages would only render her personal struggles utterly meaningless. The instructor warned that people would mock her out of pure envy, leaving her completely isolated. And in the end, she simply wouldn't have the strength to endure that heavy burden. The memory faded back to the harsh reality of the dungeon clearing. I exhaled sharply, lowering my weapon after the devastating strike finally settled. Jin Saerom stared at me wide-eyed, completely speech-bound by the raw destruction. A massive shockwave erupted skyward, shattering the ambient mana in the air. I held my ground as the violent gust swept across the cleared battlefield. The heavy strike collapsed the Titan ape's frame, sending smoke billowing from its ruined neck. I slung the wooden staff over my shoulders and let out a long breath, catching a faint sound nearby. Standing in the mist was the half-elf caster, frozen in place after watching the beast drop.
And no way.
Before stepping into full view, I adjusted the stealth mask resting against my forehead. The clearing quieted as the reality of my illegal operation settled in.
Be careful not to break it. It's pretty expensive.
I inspected the mask in my hands, completely unimpressed by the cheap plastic finish.
It stops facial recognition, changes your voice. There are more than 4 magic spells on it, buddy.
It was time to collect my pay and wrap this job up. My high-tech mask shattered into useless pieces across the forest floor. I covered my face, groaning at how badly things were going today. Peeking through my fingers, I realized my anonymity was completely shot. Jin Saerom backed away nervously, chuckling with an awkward grin. I planted my staff into the ground and turned directly toward her. I leaned in close and demanded she hand over what she had promised. She reached into her pocket and offered me a glowing silver necklace. I snatched the shiny item straight out of her hand. Holding up the emblem, I squinted to check if it was actually real. My eyes widened in disbelief as I read the writing stamped right on it.
She assumed I was some rich academy prodigy, telling me those elite training centers cost a fortune.
I just stood there in silence, resting my chin on my hand as I listened to her foolish assumptions.
Wait, you're telling me I guessed wrong.
I've never stepped foot inside an adventurer academy in my entire life.
Then who on earth taught you how to pull off combat moves like that?
Nobody. I picked up every single thing on my own. Her jaw dropped, her face going completely blank as the harsh truth sank in.
What kind of ridiculous lie is that? No self-taught amateur pulls off split-second tactical timing like that. You have to be kidding me.
Without hesitation, I tossed my wallet straight at her face, hitting her right between the eyes. She caught it, glaring at me with total outrage. I gestured for her to open it up and check the identification inside. There it was, my official student card, proving I was just a first year at a completely ordinary humanities high school. I tapped my staff against the ground, letting the harsh truth sink in.
In no way. This doesn't make any sense at all.
I pointed the tip of my staff right at her, demanding she hand over her own identity card next. I took her card and inspected it closely. She really was a first year at Warrior High School, meaning we were technically in the same year.
W8, why are you keeping my student ID?
I tilted my head, looking at her like she'd completely missed the entire point of our conversation.
She backed away slightly, her eyes widening as the reality of her situation finally began to set in.
I beckoned her over with a simple wave of my fingers, holding up my phone.
Before she could run, I grabbed her shoulder firmly, locking her in place.
I pulled her close, raising my phone to frame both of us right in front of the dead Titan ape. She froze, wide-eyed and totally helpless under my grip. I flashed a sharp, sinister smile right into the lens. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Snap, the perfect photo evidence of an illegal smuggler caught, red-handed alongside her new accomplice. Because in this world, gold class status means absolute freedom in dungeons, and total authority over those who bend the rules. I held up my phone, framing the proof of our defeat of the giant beast right behind us. Tapping through my device, I got straight down to business regarding the split of our loot.
She sighed softly, standing firm as she brought up the coin conversion rates.
A massive stack of glowing golden coins materialized right in front of us. A strange, glowing metallic cube rested quietly on the stone floor of the ruins.
She held up a single, gleaming gold coin close to her face, eyes wide with genuine curiosity.
I calmly unspooled a fresh energy snack, completely unfazed by the treasure. We pushed further into the overgrown Eugene Mall ruins, when suddenly, a sharp jolt of danger hit me.
Jin Saerom blinked, completely bewildered by my sudden change in demeanor.
Deep in the shadows lay the terrifying, glowing remains of an unprecedented dungeon anomaly.
Wait, you're actually looking for Imperial Wasp Jelly. Do you have any idea how dangerous royal jelly is? Its scent is so strong it attracts every beast in the zone. Are you really heading deeper into that section too? Because if you are, the rest of the swarm is right there.
I took a quiet bite of my chocolate bar, unbothered. Then the pieces clicked together. I see. I'd wondered why an academy student was wandering an illegal zone alone. Honestly, her being isolated makes taking all the loot way easier. I took a slow bite of my snack bar and laid it out plainly. Clearing this run was my job, not a team effort.
Jin Saerom stared back at me, her hand mid-gesture, completely lost by how casually I was treating this.
I flinched slightly when her reaction turned sharper than expected.
She pulled out her phone to track our position, accepting the arrangement without further argument.
I slung my staff back over my shoulder, ready to get back to work before more monsters sniffed us out. Jin Saerom gave a firm nod, agreeing to follow my orders to the letter. We immediately sprinted down the overgrown, ruin-filled corridor of the shopping center. Jin Saerom pushed through the air right behind me, keeping pace despite the rugged terrain. I maintained the lead, scanning the dense foliage for any sudden movement. Then I exhaled sharp breath and froze, because something deep inside this dungeon felt completely wrong. Honestly, I was starting to think I'd agreed to this deal way too fast.
Hey, can I ask you something real quick?
I told her to shoot, so she asked if I really picked up all my combat skills entirely on my own. Well, not entirely. I learned by watching my father. I vaulted over the overgrown rubble without breaking stride, keeping our pace fast. Then my instincts flared, and I froze. Silhouettes emerged from the dark canopy ahead. Claw raptors, 2-star danger threats. I told Jin Saerom to brace herself. Jin Saerom skidded to a halt, reaching for her bow in a panic. Before she could even draw, a sudden pressure burst through the clearing. I moved before the raptor could even react, closing the distance in a fraction of a second. Elite academies teach structure, but my strength came from something entirely different. As a kid, I watched my father train endlessly, absorbing every single posture and strike into memory. And from those memories, I built my own lethal combat style. The first technique I perfected was Needle, a move designed to end fights in an instant. It channels all my speed, weight, and power into a single hyper-focused point. Shattering the ground beneath my feet, I lunged forward with everything I had, piercing straight through the raptor's head before it could even snap its jaws shut. No fancy academy magic, just raw, instinctual talent honed through pure experience. The beast crashed down onto the ruined floor, completely lifeless. I stood amidst the overgrown ruins, keeping my senses razor-sharp. Jin Saerom gripped her bow, scanning the shadows as nervous sweat beaded on her forehead. She reached for her quiver, sensing the immediate danger lurking above us. Before the creature could pounce, my strike pierced straight through its neck, spraying dark blood. One hit, he was done, finished. The ruined highway stretching into Eugene Mall was crawling with beasts. Jin Saerom stared at me in total disbelief, gawk-mouthed at how effortlessly I'd cleared the threat. I just gave her a blank look. Was killing a raptor supposed to be hard?
How do you fight like that without an academy education?
I just watched someone train, I said simply, turning to push deeper into the ruins. Jin Saerom stood there with her mouth agape, her eyes rounded in complete, utter disbelief at my answer. She blurted out a frantic set of questions, unable to comprehend how someone without formal academy training could pull off such lethal precision. I kept my voice cold and steady, reminding her of the reality of our situation.
You talk like someone who has everything figured out, yet you act like a total rogue.
Before she could rant any further, she suddenly tossed a small glass ampule straight at me. My instincts kicked in instantly, my hand snatching the flying vial midair without missing a beat. It was a high-grade C-type stamina ampule, worth well over 1 million won on the market. Jin Saerom gestured toward it, assuming I would chug it down immediately to recover my depleted mana. I held the golden liquid up to the faint light, a subtle smile creeping onto my face as I calculated its real value. Instead of drinking it, I carefully tucked it right into my pocket, leaving her absolutely speechless at my frugality. I patted my pocket to make sure the ampule was secure, barely paying attention to the stunned look on her face.
She pointed a trembling finger right at me, shouting that nobody in their right mind would risk their life for a handful of quick cash.
I crossed my arms and shrugged, explaining plainly that on the black market, that single vial easily fetches a cool 1,000,000 won. Jin Saerom just stared back at me, her wide eyes completely filled with utter disbelief. To an elite academy student, My obsession with turning monster drops into cold cash was totally mind-boggling. She couldn't take her eyes off me, convinced she'd just run into the most bizarre person in the world. Ignoring her dramatic breakdown, I turned on my heel and ordered her to keep moving. I glanced back at her, shaking her head. Rich kids really have no clue how the real world works. We finally made our way to the towering facade of the overgrown shopping center, where our real objective was waiting. Crouching low along the perimeter, I reminded Jin Saerom to follow my precise instructions so we could grab the loot and get out alive. I glared at Jin Saerom, making sure she understood that following my exact commands was the only way she was surviving this dungeon. Satisfied with her quiet agreement, I turned back toward the overgrown path ahead.
Okay.
I gave the signal to start moving, stepping forward into the shadowy ruins. Saerom swallowed hard, her eyes wide as the oppressive atmosphere of the lower levels settled over us. We crossed the threshold together, stepping out onto the cracked concrete in front of the colossal shopping center. The interior was pitch black and deathly quiet, looking more like an ancient tomb than a mall. Then a sudden heavy pressure hit the air, instantly freezing us both in place.
What is this?
A sinister red energy pulsated through the air, an anomaly so unnatural that even I had never seen anything like it before. Red mist clung to the shattered floor, surrounding the severed remnants of slaughtered beasts that lay quiet in the dark. The silence pressed in heavily as the true danger of this place finally loomed over us. A cold, oppressive wind swept through the ruined dungeon corridor, carrying the stench of blood. I paused, my instincts screaming that we had just stepped into a far more dangerous situation than simple monster hunting.
Her eyes widened in absolute terror as the horrific truth finally sank in.
The floor was littered with slaughtered corpses, torn apart by something far beyond normal dungeon beasts.
These monsters aren't native to this floor at all. Even high-rank pros would die here.
A massive, grotesque anomaly crouched in the dark, pulsing with murderous intent. I glanced over my shoulder at Jin Saerom, keeping my voice dead steady despite the monster ahead. I reminded her sharply that panicking wouldn't change our reality or keep us alive. She swallowed hard and nodded, realizing that following my lead was her only shot at surviving. Suddenly, her eyes snapped past Misa's terrifying aura cut through the dark. Shattered concrete and slaughtered bodies covered the floor, proving something far more dangerous was stalking these ruins. I immediately raised my staff and dropped into a combat stance, locking my eyes on the distant silhouette. A high-danger anomaly, a slasher-lip monster, loomed out of the darkness, its massive, gaping jaws pulsing with raw malice. I didn't hesitate for a second, stepping forward and lunging straight into its attack range. Its razor-sharp teeth snapped shut, missing my flesh by a fraction of an inch. The creature shot its long, whip-like tongue straight toward me across the high-ceilinged hall. I leaned back and sliced my weapon through the air in one fluid motion. I felt a sudden shift in the air and widened my eyes, realizing something was wrong. Before I could pull back, the monster's fleshy tongue wrapped tightly around the end of my staff. It yanked with massive force, pulling me straight toward its gaping maw. I released my grip on the staff as the beast pulled, letting its own momentum drag it off balance. Flipping backward through the air, I positioned myself directly above the monster's open mouth. I snapped a sharp axe kick straight down with everything I had. My heel slammed into its gullet, smashing the slasher lip into the concrete floor as Jin Saerom watched. Landing cleanly, I reached down to scoop my weapon back up. Jin Saerom started to comment on its survivability, but I cut her off instantly. I warned her that it was far from over. A slasher lip's true threat is its dying scream, meant to signal every nearby monster to its location.
Wait, who could it possibly be calling?
Before we could move, footsteps echoed from the upper walkway. We weren't alone anymore. A man leaned over the upper railing, yawning with total indifference like he was bored of watching us.
Wait, an adventurer.
I immediately locked my eyes onto him, sensing the overwhelming threat radiating off his posture. He wiped his mouth, a mockingly gentle smile spreading across his face as he sized us up.
Well now, aren't you two a bit young to be running illegal dungeon deals?
His eyes landed straight on the crest, marked across Jin Saerom's shirt. Before we could even process his words, he vaulted straight off the balcony into the abyss. He slammed onto the ground right between us, sending a shockwave echoing through the cavern.
You're a gold-rank adventurer, aren't you?
I am, and whatever game you kids are playing down here ends right now.
She stared into the dark with wide, terrified eyes, realizing we might actually die right here.
A cold sweat broke out on my neck as I weighed the sheer weight of a gold-rank opponent. I kept my grip firm on my staff, refusing to show even a sliver of hesitation. Across the vast ruined hall, his silhouette stood tall like a wall we couldn't cross. I turned back to demand how he expected to get away with stealing directly from us.
He just casually shrugged, smirking like a wolf who knew no one was coming to rescue us.
His smile twisted into something dark and ruthless. Then it hit me, the comms didn't die because of monster venom. Someone was watching from the shadows the whole time. He had tracked every single step through the dark corridor without making a sound. Leaving a trail of footprints, he stepped forward into the murky abyss to finish what he started. A dark silhouette picked his way through the ruined corridor, tracking every footprint left in the dust. He was systematically searching every illegal smuggling hideout in the zone, hunting for his target. That's when it clicked. The lost signal with the smuggling leader wasn't caused by wasp poison at all. It was a human, a cold, calculating predator hunting down his own kind. I tightened my grip on my weapon as the suffocating pressure filled the room. He slowly drew his blade, the ornamental hilt glowing with sinister red energy. Yang Dajian revealed his twisted smile, a gold-rank veteran who'd completely shed his friendly disguise. He knew exactly who he was dealing with, a ruthless killer who didn't fight fair.
I'll try to buy us some time.
And then, without missing a single beat, Jin Saerom turned around and sprinted for her life.
Did you really think whispering would hide you from me?
Without another word, his glowing blade slashed straight for my throat. I barely brought my staff up in time to lock his steel, sparking violently inches from my face. And right on cue, Jin Saerom took off at full speed. Thanks for the backup, really.
Well, look at that. Your little girlfriend actually abandoned you. Leaving you alone against me was the last mistake she'll ever make.
The force of his follow-up strike tore through the air like thunder. Light exploded through the dark cavern as our weapons violently smashed against each other. If he thought my age meant an easy kill, he was about to get a very painful reality check. I flared my mana, enveloping my entire body in a freezing blue aura as I locked into my counterstance. He lunged at me with raw speed, his blade slicing through the air in a blinding flash. Yang Dajian pulled back mid-swing, his eyes widening as he realized his hit didn't connect. Before he could recover, I slipped past his guard, moving faster than he could track. I swept my staff low, catching him off balance and slamming him hard into the ground. The impact exploded in a massive burst of light and dust, filling the entire corridor. I dropped into a low stance, waiting for the smoke to clear with my staff raised.
Well, you actually managed to surprise me. To think a kid could force me to bring out my real gear, I definitely underestimated you. You're better than most pros. I guess I'll have to take this seriously if I want to catch that girl. Don't be scared, I'll make this quick.
He thought his shiny gold-rank status was enough to intimidate me. The concrete floor beneath us shattered as the sheer force of our standoff cracked the dungeon floor. Instead of throwing a punch right away, he just calmly set up a small portable stove to boil water. He actually sat down to eat instant ramen right in front of the gold-rank veteran, totally unbothered. He even held out the cup and offered to share it with the glaring old man. Looking down at his fallen ally, Yang Dajian scoffed, telling me to take a seat because this was going to take a while.
You think beating a reckless brute means you're hot stuff. Real dungeon battles aren't some regulated high school spar. There are no rules down here.
I quietly took another bite of noodles, analyzing how his partner had lost, not just from bad luck, but from pure incompetence. I stared into the steaming broth, mapping out his martial flaws in my head. Because when Yang Dajian stripped off his shirt and flared his mana, I realized he relied entirely on expensive gear rather than actual combat skill. I walked through the dusty ruins, listening to Yang Dajian drone on about his superior status as a gold-rank adventurer. He sat there, puffing on his cigarette while treating a lawless dungeon run like a casual afternoon snack.
Out here in the dark, kid, nobody's coming to save you. There are no rules in a dungeon.
He gestured wildly, talking about high-tier gear like it was some divine blessing that made him immortal. In his mind, he was a ruthless predator leaving a trail of blood, completely untouchable.
Wait, you're not even wearing armor. Are you insane or just stupid?
He took another drag from his cigarette, smugly reminding me that whatever happens down here stays underground.
Huh, what is that look on your face?
I locked eyes with him, my calm gaze completely throwing off his arrogant act. I just smiled, because if there really are no rules down here, then I don't have to hold back either. Yang Dajian lay wrecked on the ground, completely outmatched by someone he thought was just a kid. I took a slow drag of my cigarette, watching him struggle to comprehend what just hit him. As the smoke cleared, another shadowy figure slumped forward nearby. The bald man stared at me in complete disbelief, muttering about high-grade gear. I blew out a cloud of smoke, reminding him that shiny armor doesn't mean a thing without real skill. I dropped into a low stance, gripping my staff tightly as I prepared for whatever came next. Yang Dajian surged back up, dark aura flaring from his high-grade armor like a wounded monster. I watched his desperate charge calmly, knowing he was relying entirely on his gear's defense. I slammed my strike straight through his guard, sending him flying with absolute force. He tried to lung back in a frenzy, but his fancy armor couldn't save him from a clean counterstrike. Our weapons collided in a shower of sparks, the shockwave tearing through the ruined alley. I gritted my teeth against the crushing pressure, holding the line with everything I had.
You've got no respect for me, kid, or for your own life.
Before I could adjust my footing, his heavy boot slammed directly into my chest. The impact blasted me backward, sending me skidding across the concrete floor. I dug my heels in to stop the momentum, dust rising in my wake. I barely had time to breathe before he was right in my face again. He swung wildly, blades tearing through the air in a brutal cross pattern. A razor-sharp edge grazed my side, cleanly slicing straight through my favorite jacket. Seriously, that jacket wasn't cheap.
He cackled like a maniac, swinging his blade wildly and screaming at me to actually hit him back.
That suit of his wasn't just heavy plating. It was a high-grade A-rank shade jacket built to soak up massive damage. Inside my body, my blood pounded like a war drum as I pushed my senses to their absolute limit. Yang Dajian lunged forward with explosive speed, leaning heavily into his armor's overwhelming power. I tracked his path carefully, knowing a reckless counter against that armored monstrosity was pure suicide. One mistake, and I'd be dead on the floor. His blade whistled through the air, missing my neck by a fraction of an inch. I pivoted my body right into his blind spot, letting his momentum carry him past me. My eyes locked onto his open guard. It was time to end this.
He roared in triumph, believing he had finally trapped me right where he wanted. Well, you certainly managed to last pretty long against me.
I caught my breath, wiping the blood from my face while my mind mapped out every single movement. Shrugging off my shredded clothes, I looked right at him and muttered that I actually liked that jacket. I told him straight to his face that he really wasn't as strong as I thought. For a gold-rank veteran fighting an unequipped high school kid, his performance was honestly embarrassing. I paused, letting the silence heavy before landing the ultimate insult. He was completely carried by his expensive gear.
You arrogant, cocky little brat.
As he lost his cool and lunged recklessly, I dropped into a low stance, ready to execute my counterstrike. Jin Saerom sprinted frantically into the chamber, terrified of what she was about to witness. Yang Dajian poured every drop of dark aura into a massive, desperate strike to crush me. As he lunged from above, I dropped low, extending my staff with complete composure. He thought his shiny gear made him invincible, but I saw right through his sloppy footwork. His dark blade came crashing down, but my blue aura was already exploding forward to intercept him. Our forces collided in a blinding shockwave that cracked the dungeon floor wide open. I pivoted smoothly past his strike, using his momentum against him. He relied entirely on stats, while I unleashed a full cyclone of energy right into his exposed flank. I channeled a technique that wasn't even fully perfected yet to deliver an impossible, decisive blow. My staff shattered his high-tier defense instantly, proving skill always beats deep pockets. Power surged through my body, reaching a critical breaking point. I cleaved downward with everything I had, channeling a lethal blue aura. The force unleashed a massive circular shockwave that ripped through the room. A blinding explosion erupted, pulverizing the surrounding floor. My weapon planted firmly onto the cracked ground. Blood dripped from my mouth, but I held my ground. I caught my breath and wiped the blood off my lip. Yang Dajian stumbled back, his armor shattered and black smoke oozing from his wounds. I stared him down coldly, letting him know his time was officially over.
Fuck off, you cocky bitch. He squeezed the dagger tight, blood dripping down his shattered suit as he spat one last desperate curse. Dark aura burst around him as his glowing red eye locked onto me, refusing to accept his defeat. He swore he would kill me, no matter what it took.
The battle in the ruins reached its bloody climax. Deep inside the ruined mall's 5th floor, the dark corridor stretched out in total, eerie silence. Jin Saerom stood trembling, her breath coming in panicked, ragged wheezes. A glowing terminal rose right in front of her, illuminating her desperate face. She slammed her gloved hand onto the interface to authenticate her identity. The system chimed, confirming Jin Saerom's registration number. Just as she thought she could escape, a heavy tremor shook the entire floor. She froze, turning back toward the violence echoing behind her. A blinding flash consumed the dark hallway. I locked weapons with Yang Dajian, screaming at Jin Saerom to get out while I held the line. She finally turned and ran, knowing my survival was her only ticket out. Jin Saerom froze in the gloom, calculating her chances while I kept the pressure on. She squeezed her gold token tightly, knowing her presence here was only a liability. She had to find an escape route, immediately.
Yang Dajian raised his sword with a manic grin, completely confident in his high-tier gear.
Jin Saerom realized I wouldn't take a fight like this without having a plan to escape.
She turned around and headed toward the glowing blue portal at the end of the hall. Meanwhile, Yang Dajian's mind slipped into memories of his distant past. Back in school, he was the top student, grabbing weaker classmates by the collar at will. His victims would bleed and plead for mercy, fueling his inflated sense of power. He truly believed he was an unmatchable genius, born above everyone else. Yang Dajian grew up believing the world was simple because everything came naturally to him. His evaluation sheets were flawless, stacking perfect scores across every single subject. Praise from adults came constantly, reinforcing his belief that he was destined for greatness. He walked through his youth looking down on his peers, effortlessly keeping himself above everyone else. Until the moment, his absolute confidence took its very first hit. There was one single goal that proved entirely out of his reach. A formal rejection letter from Warrior High, crushing his assumption that his entrance was guaranteed. Unable to accept his own failure, he convinced himself the elite school only cared about wealth and political connections. so he settled for Gangyeon High instead, rationalizing that money mattered more than actual talent. He stepped through the gates, convinced that if pure skill was all that mattered, nobody could ever stand above him. Yang Dajian stared ahead, his expression cold as he recalled entering high school. He remembered standing atop the training peak, declared #1 over every other candidate. To him, the rest of the world was just a crowd of average nobodies. He watched his peers struggle and collapse, completely exhausted by tests he passed effortlessly. He smirked with pure arrogance, convinced he was a chosen genius born above the rest. The report cards only proved it. He blew second place out of the water by over 200 points. As he walked the halls, everyone whispered that he was destined to become a top-tier ranker. When graduation day arrived, the entire academy gathered to celebrate the final ceremony. Dajian held his cap, turning around calmly as his name was called out. His instructor extended a hand, offering congratulations and predicting a brilliant future. His old instructor shook his hand with a proud smile, warning him never to get arrogant and to keep pushing forward.
He dismissed the advice entirely, internally sneering at a washed-up teacher who had retired early just to babysit kids. He swore to himself that he would prove them all wrong.
The instructor just stood there, watching him with that same calm, knowing expression.
He vowed to look down on everyone from a realm normal people could never hope to reach.
Until the day a high-ranking beast completely tore through his entire squad and left him bleeding on the ground, trembling in sheer horror. Then a real high-ranker arrived, casually spearing the massive monster without taking a single scratch.
He could barely gasp out his confusion as he lay helpless in the blood-stained dirt.
The warrior didn't even acknowledge him, walking away past the carcass with total cold indifference.
That was when it hit him. He was being looked at with the exact same dismissive gaze he used to give everyone else.
As he lay bleeding in the dirt, the brutal truth finally hit Yang Dajian. He remembered his old academy instructor, realizing those past warnings were never encouragement. The veteran wasn't praising him as a future legend, he was pointing out his ceiling. He had never been one of the true chosen elites. He was just another climber reaching fruitlessly toward monsters far beyond his reach. He was merely slightly better than average, screaming in frustration at his own limits. Just a little better, and nothing more. Snapping back to the present duel, his desperation turned into pure rage. Yang Dajian activated his ultimate weapon, a cursed chest piece forged directly from a live vampire. Dark demonic energy surged forth as the armor began siphoning blood power to overwhelm me. Yang Dajian's chest piece fully erupted, transforming him into a monstrous shadow wrapped in dark blood energy. My instincts instantly sounded the alarm. One solid hit from that dark magic would be fatal. Before the thought even finished, he lunged straight for my throat. A sharp spike of vampiric blood thrust forward like a spear. It blew through the wall behind me, but as I stepped aside, I noticed the flaw. His actual movement speed hadn't gotten any faster. Overconfident in his gear, Yang Dajian pressed his assault with glowing red eyes. He swept his claws forward, hurling a wide arc of lethal shadow magic. So I simply vaulted high into the air on my staff, letting his massive wave crash harmlessly beneath me. Dark vampiric fluid dripped onto the stone floor as his grand strike hit nothing but air. He was already gasping for breath inside that expensive armor, having spent all that power for nothing. Gasping for air, he leaned heavily on his staff, his body battered and bloody. He glared at me through the blood dripping down his face, breathing raggedly. Cloaked in dark, monstrous aura, I praised his reaction speed and undeniable talent. Then I paused and asked him directly why someone with his skill was acting as a low-life smuggler. Ignoring the question, he bit down hard on the golden potion vial between his teeth. He gritted out that it was just business, dismissive of my curiosity. He flinched as I sarcastically thanked him for his honesty.
Because now, I get the sheer satisfaction of stomping out a prodigy like you.
He flexed his jagged dark claws, readying one final desperate strike. With a burst of dark energy, he lunged forward, putting everything into his final attack. He charged right into the dark vortex, his blood boiling as he pushed his body to the absolute limit.
My body is moving without any problems. I can still go higher. Incredible, very incredible. Show me more of what you've got. He won't be able to maintain that insane speed forever. If his power relies on blood as fuel, he'll hit his absolute limit soon enough. If I bait him into consuming more blood and use needle. I know that already. Victory is mine.
The monstrous shadow towered over me, lunging forward to crush any chance of escape. A blinding fiery explosion erupted in an instant, shattering his desperate assault into pieces. He stared in utter disbelief as he realized his calculated plan didn't mean a thing. While Jin Saerom clutched her bow and panted heavily, desperately searching for an escape route through the ruins, the atmosphere between us turned deadly.
You really think a nobody like you can overcome my gear?
He tried to force his vampire jacket's shadowy power to its limit, but pure horror suddenly seized his face when he realized I was already right in front of him. I didn't give him a single second to react, channeling a heavy arc of blue energy directly into his open stance. A blinding blast of pure force ripped through the hall, shattering his expensive gear and crushing his overinflated pride in one decisive blow. And just like that, the corrupt gold rank veteran was completely dismantled by the very skill he had spent a lifetime looking down on. The dust finally settled over the shattered ruins of the mall. Yang Dajian lay utterly broken in the dirt, his eyes rolled back after my final blow. I told Jin Saerom not to stress over him while taking a quick photo of his unconscious face for proof.
Is he really not going to wake up anytime soon?
I slung my torn jacket over my shoulder and asked her if that was evidence enough to satisfy her. Without waiting around, I picked up my wooden staff off the cold floor. I turned back to make sure she was actually following behind me. I reminded her of the rules. The first was keeping her mouth shut about what happened here. And the second was making sure she paid me every single cent she owed me for saving her life. Jin Saerom turned bright red, completely flustered and embarrassed by my blunt demands.
She shouted after me, complaining that it wouldn't hurt to just say thank you for once.
Leaving her behind, I slipped deeper into the dark, abandoned ruins of the flooded lower levels. Up ahead, a warm golden glow cut through the darkness of the cavernous breach. Jin Saerom quickly caught up with Misui, stepped down into the glowing chamber together. Both of us froze, stunned by the sheer concentration of energy radiating from below. We descended the stone steps into the heart of the nest, bathed in shimmering light.
She caught a whiff of the air and gasped at the insanely sweet aroma.
Thick golden mist swirled all around us, rich with pure monster energy. And right at the center of the nest sat a broken, bloody figure. It was Yang Dajian, beaten and bleeding, desperately clutching the container of harvested jelly. I crouched right over Yang Dajian, eyeing the black case he was still clinging to like a lifeline. He just bowed his head in complete silence, broken and thoroughly outmatched. I turned back to Jin Saerom and asked if she'd followed me all this way just to watch the show. She flinched as I reached down to unlatch the chest and see what was inside. The second the lock clicked open, a brilliant golden light burst through the seam. An overwhelmingly sweet aroma washed over us, taking both of us completely off guard. Inside rested a lantern glowing with pure, liquid gold, the Imperial Royal Jelly. I glanced sideways at the nearby monster remains, noticing something else tucked beside it. There was a thick sack right next to the lantern, pulsating with that same radiant aura. I slammed the chest shut, securing the haul before anyone else could catch wind of it. We both stood there in absolute silence, staring at the empty space where the gold-rank adventurer had just been standing. He was gone, vanishing into the darkness before we could even process his move.
Just you wait, you bastards. I remember both of your faces. I'll do whatever I can to kill you. I'll make sure you regret what you did today."
He sprinted through the overgrown forest path, blood dripping down his manic, toothy grin. Suddenly, his insane smirk completely vanished as a chill ran down his spine. A massive, terrifying creature dropped down from the canopy right on top of him.
Ah,
A twisted, monstrous creature dropped right on top of him, crushing the life out of his desperate threats. With the threat neutralized, Jin Saerom and I stood together in the quiet ruins. I glanced over at her and suggested we head out through the back door before anyone else showed up. We finally made our way out, emerging into the crisp air just as the sun began to set over the ruined city. I scrambled up to a high rocky ridge to scout our surroundings, keeping my duffel bag close.
She caught up to him and asked about my upcoming entrance exam.
I held out my hand to part ways, telling her it was nice working together. We'd both achieved what we came into this dangerous place for.
A quiet, relieved smile crossed her face as she looked at me.
We shook hands, sealing our unspoken pact of secrecy before separating into the evening shadows. I turned my back on her with the heavy case slung over my shoulder, laying down the bottom line one last time: total secrecy, prompt payment, and a cold warning to stay away from my path. She stood frozen in place, her lips slightly parted as she stared after me in complete awe. A sudden rustle made me glance back, making sure she wasn't foolish enough to follow. Back at the hideout, an empty instant ramen cup and discarded water bottles littered the cold floor. I Am Yiwen glanced up from his book, completely unfazed by my late return.
"Look who finally decided to show up. Did you have a good time out there?"
I set the locked metal container down on the table with a heavy thud. I Am Yiwen took a slow drag from his cigarette, his eyes narrowing as he evaluated the score. He lifted the lantern container, mesmerized by the intense golden glow of the Imperial Royal jelly inside.
"This stuff is worth a fortune. I'll make sure your cut hits your account tomorrow."
I Am Yiwen took a slow drag from his cigarette, unable to pull his eyes away from the golden glow. He glanced at me beat-up state, asking if I was all right after taking down a gold rank hunter.
"Did that corrupt veteran really drop dead right in front of you?"
I reached into my pocket, completely unbothered by Yang Dajian's fate. Yiwen blew out a cloud of smoke, waiting for my answer. I told him to forget about the guy and pulled off my coat, revealing my school badge underneath. He turned toward the open briefcase packed with my full cash reward. Those 2 bags were more than enough to cover my father's hospital bills for months. As I adjusted my uniform, Yiwen brought up something unexpected. He reminded me that this royal jelly could drastically boost mana growth in students, making it the ultimate tool for the upcoming Warrior High School entrance exam. It turns out the royal jelly doesn't just heal. It can actively refine a person's mana core and elevate their potential.
Because the jelly only works on people who haven't reached full adulthood yet, its value to prospective students is absolute.
That meant the high-profile buyer who commissioned this lucrative hunt had to be connected to the elite academies.
"All right, kid, your work here is done, so get going before the official patrol sweeps the area."
I turned away without another word, stepping out into the cool evening air with my earnings secured. Behind me, the discarded cigarette smoldered softly against the cold concrete floor. The sunset bathed the shattered city ruins in a brilliant crimson light as I looked over the landscape. Warrior High, the premier academy where the strongest young fighters gather to step into the daylight world. My path was clear. If taking that entrance exam is what it takes to protect my family and unleash my real power, then I'll see them real soon. I paused in the fading twilight, asking Jin Saerom straight up why she was following me, and she didn't mince her words.
She looked back at me under the glowing horizon, mentioning that an elite entrance exam was coming up this winter.
Even though they only accept a tiny fraction of applicants, she insisted I had a real shot at making it.
Reaching out her hand toward me with unwavering conviction, she urged me to step into the light and join Warrior High.
The sky darkened over the horizon as I considered her offer, ready to take on whatever came next. A lone adventurer trotted through the forest, sword in hand and completely oblivious to the world. He raised his sword in triumph over a fallen serpent, thinking the hunt was already over. Then a giant harpy swooped down from the sky, instantly panicking the poor guy. Out of nowhere, a heavily armored tank stepped up to block the diving assault with his massive shield. Behind him, an archer drew her bow, providing instant long-range cover. With perfect teamwork, they brought the monster down and celebrated together. That cute scenario is how party play is supposed to look. I listened as Jin Saerom brought up the ugly reality of political factions inside Warrior High.
She sighed deeply, crossing her arms as she explained it was far worse than petty high school drama. Holding up 2 fingers, she spelled out that 2 dominant factions controlled their entire grade. She revealed that the top 2 students in our grade led the 2 main factions.
2 elite students stood side by side, radiating a cold aura of untouchable authority. I paused, asking if she was completely cut out from both groups.
Jin Saerom shook her head with a weary sigh, admitting the teachers refused to step in.
I scratched my head, realizing just how ruthless the system really was.
She cuts in before I can speak, assuming I just blame her lack of skill.
I listened in silence as her voice trailed off into the fading dusk.
She insisted that even without top-tier stats, she deserved a spot in a functional team.
Standing in the light, she looked completely dwarfed by the smirking shadows of her peers.
Even the unaffiliated kids formed their own closed cliques, leaving her entirely stranded. One of the top faction leaders hates me, even if she pretends not to. She keeps her smile clean, but those eyes are looking for any excuse to bury me. Behind closed doors, she systematically turns everyone against Mesum, forced to fight alone.
I asked if she stole the girl's boyfriend or something, and she deadpanned that it wasn't even that interesting.
I can survive solo in the early stages, but mandatory party combat is coming next semester. That's why I want to hire you directly as my combat partner. With your strength and instincts, I actually stand a chance.
Her offer hung in the air, a desperate plea for survival in a corrupt system. Instead of getting wrapped up in academy politics, I quietly packed up my medical supplies and walked away. I had my own injuries to bandage and an entrance exam to prepare for. I didn't need anyone else's trouble. Sitting alone on the edge of my bed, I bound my bruised hands and let out a heavy sigh. Back in the forest, Jin Saerom caught her breath and leaned heavily against a tree trunk.
She stared into the distance, completely stunned that I had rejected her offer so flatly.
Deep within the Gangnam dungeon zone, an ominous glow settled over the thorny woodland. The 12th sector of the barrier was quiet, but the air felt heavy with impending danger.
She watched my silhouette vanish into the dusk, unable to believe how heartless I was.
The silence stretched out between Yuzasi, put distance between myself and her problems. I gave her a brief wave over my shoulder, wishing her good luck without turning around.
She swallowed hard, whispering to herself whether I really meant to walk away for good.
She flinched as the harsh reality set in. She would have to face the academy factions all on her own. Meanwhile, near the Gangnam barrier zone, Class 1 melee combat instructor Kang Young-suk was keeping a watchful eye on the forest perimeter.
Jin Saerom approached him directly, reporting that an unexpected situation had broken out deeper in the training sector. He turned his head slightly, listening intensely to every single detail of her report.
She flinched as she explained that several students had already hit their limit and called for immediate rescue.
Step by step, Kang Young-suk moved right in front of her, stepping up as the authority figure in charge. His scarred face hardened as he double-checked, if there were any other casualties left unaccounted for.
She swallowed her fear and shook her head, confirming that no one else was trapped.
The veteran instructor narrowed his eyes as a sudden, heavy pressure echoed through the woods. Out of nowhere, a massive, shadowy, four-armed beast materialized behind them, forcing Kang Young-suk to order Saerom to safety.
She gasped in sheer terror, spinning on her heel to leap out of the monster's lethal strike zone.
A massive, scarred titan ape lowered its head, exhuming a thick cloud of white steam from its jaw. Kang Young-suk stepped forward without hesitation, placing his body squarely between the towering beast and Jin Saerom.
He glares up at the creature, his expression steady despite the burn scar across his right eye.
Saerom panicked, suddenly realizing the beast had been lured here on purpose.
Her mind flashed back to the dungeon chest, where I'd gathered that irresistible royal jelly scent.
Kang Young-suk raised his prosthetic mechanical arm, flexing his steel fingers into place.
The beast grinned savagely, its glowing white eyes locking onto its targets. It lunged straight downward, thrusting a massive clawed hand to crush the instructor where he stood. Instead of flinching, Kang Young-suk channeled raw golden aura directly into his mechanical fist. With a burst of blinding flames, he drove his blazing fist straight into the monster's strike. Kang Young-suk put everything he had into that single, fiery punch. The colossal monster was launched straight into the air by the sheer force of the impact. Golden flames burst outward, completely consuming the Titan's massive arm. With a thunderous crash, the enormous beast slammed down onto the hard ground. It flopped onto its back, tongue trailing out, completely unconscious. Kang Young-suk turned his head, checking the perimeter with a stern gaze. A final wave of heat flared behind him as the remaining flames settled. He deactivated his aura, letting smoke rise quietly from his mechanical fist. Jin Saerom stared back in total shock, barely able to process what she'd just witnessed.
That could have been very dangerous, but you're safe now. Instructor Kang Young-suk placed a heavy, reassuring hand on Jin Saerom's shoulder, assuring her that the crisis was finally over.
Saerom looked up at him in stunned silence, her mind barely processing how quickly the danger had vanished. Without another word, Kang Young-suk turned and began walking back through the glowing, ember-lit forest. High above the trees, the secure perimeter of the Warrior High Practical Base Camp came into full view. Inside one of the shelters, a heavily armored vanguard stood over a seated student who was quietly checking his device. The armored guard glanced down, ensuring everyone inside remained calm and accounted for after the lockdown. Outside, Kang Young-suk led Saerom safely back along the cleared forest trail toward the main facility.
He gestured toward the dome entrances ahead, pointing her toward the designated safe zone.
Saerom gave a quick nod, acknowledging his direction as the tension finally began to leave her body.
She placed a hand over her heart and let out a deep, trembling exhale, truly safe at last. A girl steps up with a polite, razor-sharp smile, asking if Jin Saerom is really doing all right after everything.
Jin Saerom turns instantly, her eyes widening as she recognizes the fake sympathy for what it really is.
The three faction members stroll up together in full uniform, looking like they practice their fake concern in a mirror.
Saerom shoots back with a cool, sarcastic grin, knowing full well none of them actually care.
The blonde girl feigns heartbreak with an exaggerated pout, playing off the passive-aggressive jab like a pro. With the threat diffused and the political games resuming, the base camp settles back into its uneasy peace. A spark flared in young Jin Saerom's palm, the faint heat trembling under her desperate grip.
Increase your output, Saerom. I know you can go further than this.
At just 11 years old, Saerom pushed her body to the brink, fighting to maintain the unstable spell. Her eyes widened in sheer panic as the magic slipped entirely beyond her control.
All right, that is enough. At least you have improved slightly since last time.
She collapsed forward, her lungs burning, left with only backhanded praise for all her effort.
Now that is real talent. Excellent work.
Saerom turned her head toward the praise she would never receive. Across the gym, a massive crest of fire blazed effortless rings around her young cousin. Anisha Esker commanded the flames like child's play, completely overshadowing Saerom without even trying. Uncle Zeke Esker stared at Jin Saerom with absolute coldness, declaring her mixed-blood heritage made her inherently flawed. Yet right beside her, Anisha Esker conjured overwhelming, pure flames without breaking a sweat.
Your cousin is a true genius, and if you stay on this path, you will live in her shadow forever.
Anisha turned around with an unsettling, wide-eyed smile that hid something far darker.
You had better be careful, Saerom.
One wrong step, and she was ready to utterly break her. Years later, Saerom stood alone, looking back with a bewildered, hesitant expression. Other students wouldn't even walk near her, openly asking why nobody would ever team up with a half-breed. Saerom paused, turning her head back toward the classmate who dared speak to her.
If you're so curious, why don't you try forming a party with me?
She laughed it off, claiming having two ranged damage dealers in one party made no sense.
Saerom could only glare, her chest tightening as the rejection hit.
Anisha kept that polished smile up, acting like she was saving everyone the hassle.
Saerom stood alone with her bow, knowing she'd be pushed into a retest. Then Anisha stepped right into her space, completely catching her off guard. A cold, mocking smirk settled on her cousin's lips.
Standing back to back, Anisha dismissed her with a single word.
Her eyes gleamed with pure condescension. Saerom clenched her jaw, watching her walk away surrounded by supporters.
Anisha cast one final glance over her shoulder, telling Saerom to just give up.
I rushed to the hospital as night fell, my heart sinking with every step. I burst through the door out of breath, terrified of what I might find. I asked the medical team if there was any change in my father's condition. The dark, toxic veins from the dragon blood infection were still creeping up his neck. The doctor and nurse exchanged a quiet, heavy look before telling me to sit down. I walked down the long hospital hallway, preparing myself for the worst. In his office, the specialist admitted that almost no one ever survives dragon blood poisoning. I sat there with my hands clenched tight, refusing to accept that my father was beyond saving. The doctor explained that standard medicine couldn't flush out the poison, leaving only one impossible cure. The antidote required milk from a sky tiger, a 5-star calamity beast that meant certain death to harvest. I slammed my hand down on the desk, telling the doctor that cost wasn't the problem if it meant saving my dad. He explained how hunters turn raw monster materials into lucrative stat-enhancing enhancers instead of medicine. And the core ingredient for those high-end combat drugs, the exact same sky tiger milk. He held up a sample vial, emphasizing just how precious every single drop is to the corporations. Corporations buy out every batch from high-rank hunters before it ever touches a hospital shelf. I leaned over his desk in disbelief. They were hoarding life-saving medicine just to turn a profit. The doctor held up his hands helplessly, admitting the medical industry couldn't compete with hunter cartels. One single bottle of raw milk gets refined into dozens of combat doses sold for millions. He looked me in the eyes and stated the brutal truth. Nobody was going to give up that kind of wealth for a dying man. The realization hit me hard. If I wanted to save my dad, I'd have to get strong enough to claim it myself. Outside the hospital room, the harsh reality hung over me under the cold night sky. Even if I managed to scrape together the money, it meant nothing without that unobtainable ingredient. I sat alone on a park bench, the weight of my father's fate pressing down on my shoulders. I let out a long, heavy sigh, realizing I was done waiting for miracles. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number that offered a way forward. The line rang, cutting through the silence of the night. Jin Saerom nearly dropped her phone in shock when she saw my name pop up. She picked up instantly, trying and failing to sound totally nonchalant. I don't think I have a choice but to accept.
a condition you had in mind.
A gym towel and a water bottle rested on a bench, silent witnesses to an unyielding routine. I held the phone tight against my ear, pressing for confirmation that this lead on the cure was real.
Don't sweat it. I've got full access to our family's research facilities.
I buried my face in my hand, relief crashing over me as the desperate gamble finally paid off. Leaning back on the park bench outside the hospital, I asked if she was free this Sunday.
Of course, we need to get everything ready for the entrance exam anyway.
That Sunday, I stood before the massive headquarters of the Jin Saerom Group Research Institute. Carrying my weapon case across my back, I took a steadying breath outside the main gate. A familiar voice called out, making me turn around on the spot.
Look at you showing up right on time.
We stood together before the massive structure, taking in the sheer size of the Research Institute. After the world changed, humanity gained access to abilities far beyond their original limits. Before the world fusion, an average person's stat potential capped out at rank D. Back then, pushing yourself up to rank C meant you were considered a prodigy. Anything hitting rank B was seen as straight-up superhuman power. To even qualify for standard adventurer work, you had to hit rank C across 5 core stats.
That's the absolute bare minimum just to get your license. But for Warrior High, you need rank B in at least 3 categories to even be considered.
I scratched the back of my neck, taking in the steep requirements.
Things get a bit more complicated once you hit puberty, though.
I glanced sideways, letting her explanation sink in while keeping my face completely unreadable. Slagging into the testing suit, the visor snapped shut over my eyes. I stood in the center of the research vault, staff gripped loosely in one hand. A massive steel combat automaton towered over me, powering up its core for the test. Honestly, I'd been wondering about it myself for a long time. Time to see what my real limits actually look like. The machine hummed to life as the assessment officially began. I gripped my staff, locking my eyes on the mechanical monstrosity ahead. The golem's central core ignited with a cold, blue glow. It towered over me, venting steam as its massive frame hummed to life. Up in the control booth, screens broadcast every angle of the high-stakes test.
Usually, people freeze up the second a research golem powers on.
Young Yeoman took a casual sip of her coffee, completely unbothered.
He isn't exactly the type to get scared easily.
She set her mug down on the console.
All right then, let's see what he's really made of.
The golem lunged forward with crushing force, but my aura flared instantly. Out on the cold stone floor, the training golem reset its stance, extending its arms to calibrate for the next strike. It rushed forward with heavy, mechanical footsteps, lifting a massive metal crate to throw directly at my head. I didn't flinch for a second, casually catching the overhead steel beam with a single hand. The arena's core processor hummed loudly, glowing as it calculated my physical output.
That kid's physique isn't normal. It's practically professional grade, meaning pushing him to his absolute limit isn't going to be easy.
Up in the observation room, Yeoman glanced over at Saerom, assuming I had to be getting exhausted by now.
Didn't you say your friend went to a completely ordinary high school?
Down in the ring, the golem sparkled with short-circuiting electricity before collapsing onto its knees.
How in the world did someone with talent like this fail an entrance exam?
I ducked right past the construct's wild swing, swung behind it, and shattered its armor with a single lethal counterstrike.
He's insane. He's outperforming trained pros on sheer instinct alone.
Jin Saerom stared at the monitor, completely stunned by how easily I dismantled the construct. Young Yeoman leaned back, tapping her chin in deep contemplation. I stood in the center of the arena, barely catching my breath, waiting for whatever came next. Sparks crackled along the base of the defeated golem as the simulation paused. Young Yeoman declared that nudging the difficulty up a notch or two would be a complete waste of time. She turned around in her chair, dead serious about pushing the test to its absolute limit.
Disabling safe mode for an uncertified civilian is literally a federal crime. Are you seriously suggesting we risk everything just to see his ceiling?
Young Yeoman just pressed her temples, trying to calculate the sheer absurdity of my combat data. Young Yeoman massaged her temples in pure disbelief, trying to process how an unranked kid was shattering every performance ceiling they had. Then the alarm chimed, sending Yeoman into a full-blown panic.
Running unauthorized tests on a Sunday. I expected better discipline.
Uncle, you weren't supposed to be here today.
Bypassing security protocols for an unregistered guest is an offense that carries severe consequences.
Please, Uncle. I brought him here under my own responsibility.
Responsibility.
Saerom flinched, the weight of his glare cutting through any excuse she had left.
This lab is not yours. And there is nothing here you have the authority to take responsibility for.
Watching the director corner his own family, I realized the ruthless rumors about Zeke Esker weren't exaggerated in the slightest. He had treated Saerom with that exact cold detachment ever since she was a kid, no matter how hard she tried to prove herself. She had done nothing wrong, yet she stood there taking the full force of his cruel, unyielding judgment. Yeoman swallowed hard, knowing high-ranking adventurers used this private facility all the time, making our unauthorized stunt even worse. My voice cut right through the heavy atmosphere from the intercom speaker below. I glanced up at the observation glass and casually asked if there was a problem with the testing.
Who is that down there? Is she an adventurer on your level?
That's just a friend of mine.
He failed his entrance exams last year, Director, but he's desperately trying to become an adventurer.
Zeke narrowed his eyes, silent as he watched me stand effortlessly in the arena below. Down in the arena, the heavy golem slumped forward, completely disabled from the impact.
You said the safe mode settings weren't enough for him.
Young Yeoman and Jin Saerom both froze, startled by the sudden shift in tone.
High schoolers these days are just built different, right? If the automated systems can't properly gauge his power, then I'll test him myself.
I stood alone in the quiet arena, holding my staff and waiting for the next round. A sudden chime rang out as the arena access gate unexpectedly unlocked. The heavy reinforced doors slid open with a low, mechanical hiss. I watched a figure step out into the light, far larger than any standard opponent. Director Zeke Esker calmly rolled up his sleeves, stepping into the ring as my next opponent. My eyes locked onto him behind my helmet, every instinct screaming that this was no longer a routine test.
What kind of monster is this guy?
I tightened my grip on the staff, shifting my stance into a low, defensive guard.
Looks like you finally understand the situation.
Facing him brought back memories of Yang Dajian, the same predatory aura of a seasoned killer. Blue mana erupted around Zeke Esker, enveloping his tall silhouette in suffocating pressure. I swallowed hard, the heavy atmosphere pressing down on my chest.
Don't worry about holding back to save my life.
I kicked off the wall with everything I had, launching myself straight toward him like a missile. My staff cleaved through the air in a massive blue crescent arc, aiming directly at the director. Because standing in front of me wasn't just a researcher, this was Zeke Esker, Jin Saerom's uncle and director of research. He casually raised a hand to block my strike, stopping my fully boosted staff like it was nothing more than a stray breeze. His eyes bored into mine with absolute coldness, the unquestioned authority of Korea's 7th-ranked ranker. He held a white class rank, a tier reserved only for the absolute apex of human combatants. Only the top 10 strongest individuals in the entire nation ever earned the right to wear that title. And right now, I was about to find out exactly why they called him a monster. Zeke launched himself off the wall with terrifying speed, coming at me like a missile. He swung his weapon with enough force to split the room, forcing me back. I gritted my teeth, scanning his form frantically. There wasn't a single opening. Even as I tried to evade, he anticipated my dodge and leaped straight over me. His movements were a seamless, continuous flow, leaving no gap to counter. Every standard tactic I knew failed against someone with his level of experience. He pressed the attack violently, forcing me to block an impossible blow. The heavy impact shook my core, but I managed to hold onto my weapon. Zeke paused for a fraction of a second, his eyes darkening.
You rely too much on raw talent. It's more frivolous than I thought.
He caught my side kick clean across his raised shin, blue energy bursting from the impact. Before I could even reset my footing, Zeke was already ducking inside my guard. He slammed a wave of compressed air right into the ground, blasting me clear across the training ring. I slammed onto my knees, gasping for air as the suit's strain flared up.
If you came here just to test your limits with party tricks, you can leave right now.
I forced myself back up, panting inside the helmet as I raised my fists. Zeke didn't even use a weapon. He casually nudged my fallen staff with the tip of his shoe.
Pick it up. Let's see if you can hold on to it this time.
I stared at him through the visor, my eyes narrowing. If he wanted to see what unrefined talent looks like when it stops holding back, fine. Blue energy began gathering rapidly around my hand as I readied my stance.
If you pull a stunt like that again, I'll end this evaluation immediately and send you packing.
I adjusted my grip on the staff, unbothered by his threat. Without giving him time to react, I lunged forward with explosive speed. Zeke raised his hand, tracking my approach with cold precision. I slammed my foot into the floor, shifting my weight in an instant. Zeke's eyes widened slightly as my sudden change of pace caught him off guard. He immediately unleashed a pair of sharp, high-speed energy blasts directly toward me. Zeke effortlessly dodged sideways, letting the ranged attacks breeze right past him. Smirking behind my helmet, I unleashed a barrage of strikes to show him this was just the beginning. I gripped my weapon tightly, channeling my mana directly into the frame as energy began to surge. I swung forward with everything I had, while Zeke Esker tracked my trajectory with cool, calculated indifference. The strike erupted into a cascade of blue aura blades, sweeping across the entire arena directly toward him. Zeke merely narrowed his eyes, raising a single hand without a hint of panic. Clenching his fist, he casually deflected the entire flurry with raw force. From the observation booth, the incredible shockwave lit up the entire monitor display.
You're seriously telling me a guy with this kind of power didn't get accepted into any other academy?
Young Yeoman stared blankly at the screen, completely speechless.
Is there something you're not telling me?
Yeoman glanced up nervously, completely unable to process what she was watching. Up in the observation room, Jin Saerom stared down at the arena floor, sweat running down her cheek as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing.
He's actually fighting on equal footing with Uncle Zeke.
Zeke didn't give me a single second to breathe, sliding across the polished floor and aiming a ruthless strike directly at my chest. I barely caught his blow in time, the sheer weight of his aura pressing against my sword and rattling my teeth. Young Yeoman clasped her hands around her neck in sheer terror, entirely convinced I was about to be broken in half. Zeke's oppressive aura overwhelmed my guard, forcing me backward as I completely lost control of the pace. Gritting my teeth through the pain, I dug my heels into the concrete and forced my arms to hold the line. My jaw clenched tight as I refused to let my grip slip, pouring every ounce of physical strength into my weapon. With a sudden burst of momentum, I shoved back against his press and swung hard to reset our distance.
Not bad. You actually managed to keep hold of your weapon under that kind of pressure.
Zeke countered with a vicious strike, driving me back and forcing me to take the hit dead on. I clenched my fist tight, channeling every ounce of mana I had to withstand the impact. The force sent me skidding across the reinforced floor, leaving deep gouges in its wake.
He's still holding back.
Jin Saerom watched in complete silence, realizing I hadn't even shown my full strength yet.
There's no need to feel bad about losing to me.
I caught my breath, my hands trembling slightly against the shaft of my staff. Zeke looked at me, expecting me to concede after taking his full combination. Young Yeoman leaned forward, unable to tear her eyes away from the arena floor. Jin Saerom held her breath as I slowly straightened my posture. Young Yeoman took a slow, calm sip from her mug, watching the arena floor. She lowered her cup with a quiet sigh, surprised by what was unfolding. Jin Saerom stared in realization, remembering that I'd never had a proper teacher. Zeke calmly rolled up his sleeves while I leaned against the cracked arena wall, catching my breath.
Although you have the talent everyone wishes for, you don't put in any effort.
My training helmet lay cracked on the floor. I clenched my gloved fist, holding tight onto my weapon.
Someone as weak as you could get killed relying on that kind of talent.
I leaned on my staff, gasping for air in the heavy silence. I wiped the sweat from my face and glared up at him, ready to drop the holdback. Zeke narrowed his eyes, a flicker of genuine disbelief crossing his face as he realized his decisive strike hadn't put me down. I took a heavy step forward through the settling dust, refusing to yield an inch of ground. Tightening my grip on my staff, I stared him down with a confident smirk, ready to unleash everything I'd been holding back. The line between raw instinct and true mastery was about to be crossed once and for all. Up in the control room, the staff watched our spar unfold on the monitors in utter disbelief. The research staff could barely process the sheer scale of the power tearing through the arena floor.
Stop the match right now.
The intercom buzzed, announcing I could end the test immediately and receive my evaluation.
The outcome won't change, no matter how many times we fight. Shouldn't you be aware of that by now?
Zeke stared down at me with pure dismissal, treating my entire effort as nothing more than amateurish struggle. I lowered my head and let out a breathless chuckle. I flared my mana till the ground shook, telling him I was just pissed off and he was getting beaten up. Truth was, the reason I even stepped into this arena went way beyond a simple test. Without a master to guide me, I had to build every single stance from scratch in the wild. However, I didn't need a fancy academy to learn how to swing a blade. Pure, raw talent carried me through the gaps where formal lessons were missing. I filled in every single blind spot with pure instinct and sheer willpower. And out in the lawless dungeons, fighting vicious beasts wasn't a lesson, it was survival. That brutal experience let me move freely, turning life-or-death fights into my personal playground. Even with that kind of progress, I never once let myself get arrogant. Because frankly, every time I met high-ranking adventurers out in the field, they always talked a big game. And almost all of them turned out to be total frauds. Take Yang Dajian and Lee Piljiu, stiff, overconfident, and helpless the moment gear couldn't save them. Zeke chuckled softly, his voice dropping into an icy, deadly tone as the arena went dead silent.
If you think throwing a temper tantrum is gonna change the outcome here, you're dead wrong. I'll make sure to beat you so hard that you lose the will to even be angry.
The sheer weight of his aura hit like a tidal wave, and for a second, my heart actually skipped a beat. But then a smirk pulled at my lips, because getting beaten up by a top hero was way more fun than fighting frauds. Everything I knew about survival didn't come from elite academies or fancy manuals. It came from watching the back of one man. I shifted my stance and redistributed my weight, letting my father's battle form flow naturally through my limbs.
Wait, is Chief Zeke actually taking this kid completely seriously now?
Jin Saerom gripped the edge of the console, completely speechless as my presence shifted in the arena.
His posture and weight balance. He's not holding a staff stance.
A thick blue aura exploded around Misi, locked into a sharp spear stance, cutting through the heavy air. I took a deep breath, focusing every ounce of strength into my center. In the blink of an eye, I charged forward, spinning my weapon into a blinding vortex of mana right before Zeke Esker. I unleashed a heavy, horizontal sweep across the ring. Zeke barely tilted his head, watching the wind from my attack slice right past his cheek. In the control room, Young Yeoman gasped, clutching her hands in utter disbelief at my sudden burst. I didn't pause for a microsecond, spinning on my heel to launch a ferocious barrage of thrusts. Yet Zeke dodged each blow with effortless fluid steps, slipping through my storm untouched.
It's simple and rough, completely different from a standard high school style.
Jin Saerom watched intently alongside Young Yeoman as the combat data flooded their monitors. My instincts take over, channeling every ounce of raw, unrefined aura into a single desperate strike. I remember my father back home, sweating through his own grueling daily training without ever complaining. As a young kid, I used to stand at the threshold, eagerly watching him swing his spear in the courtyard. I didn't have fancy academy tutors, but I learned how to move by watching the best. Zeke Esker presses the attack relentlessly, his refined speed tearing right through my guard. Even back then, holding just a broomstick, I knew I wanted to follow in those impossible footsteps. Zeke steps inside my range in a flash, completely bypassing my defensive swing. With cold precision, Korea's 7th-ranked hero lunges forward to shut this down. My father always turned around with a proud, warm gaze whenever he caught me mimicking his forms. Zeke unleashes a massive, crushing blow that explodes across the arena floor, bringing the spar to a definitive end. My father used to pause whenever he noticed me watching him train, caught off guard by my intensity. I focused every drop of blue aura into my fist, locking my eyes on Zeke with absolute determination. He would gently lower his hand, ready to teach me the moves I tried so hard to copy. I launched myself across the arena floor, turning my entire body into a streak of pure blue light. Back then, all I wanted was to earn his approval and prove I was strong enough to follow his path. I gritted my teeth and drove straight through the air pressure, refusing to yield an inch. And every single time, he'd rough my hair with a chuckle, breaking my serious stoic face. He always looked at me with that proud, warm gaze that made me feel unstoppable. An explosive shockwave erupted as our forces collided, sending violent air currents crashing through the test chamber. Zeke pulled back his hand in shock, his eyes wide as he realized the sheer weight behind my instinctual strike. Zeke was moving too fast. There was no way I could dodge his next strike in time. He lunged forward like a blur of lethal force, closing the distance before I could even blink. So I stopped trying to dodge and met his blow head-on with everything I had. From the observation booth, Jin Saerom gasped as the violent shockwave rattled the glass. Heavy dust settled slowly over the shattered arena floor as the violent burst of mana finally died down.
Zeke stood over me, looking down with a silent, contemplative expression. He pointed out that if I had just kept dodging and extended the fight, I might have actually pulled off a win. Was taking that hit head-on just your final display of pride?
I lay flat on my back, gasping for air with a swollen black eye and my body aching everywhere. Yeah, flexing my pride against a top 7 hero got me completely battered, but honestly, it was worth it. Zeke stood over me, his face totally unbothered as the dust finally began to settle. And there I was, spread out flat on the cold floor, completely out of commission. My eye was already swollen shut, every single muscle aching like I'd been run over by a truck.
Saerom came running in from the entrance, yelling out to her uncle in panic.
She skidded to a stop, her ears drooping as she stared at my wrecked body in total shock. Zeke didn't say a word, simply extending a hand as glowing blue mana began to gather around his palm. He placed his hand over my forehead, letting a warm, healing magic pour straight into my battered head. The sharp pain began to fade instantly, leaving me resting in a state of quiet relief. Zeke stuffed his hands into his pockets and walked over to join Saerom, leaving me to rest on the ground.
Saerom turned to her uncle, confirming my full name to him with a confused look.
Zeke froze, his sharp eyes narrowing as the weight of the revelation settled over him.
He looked straight ahead, completely stunned that the legendary Dragon Slayer's son was standing right in front of him.
And just like that, everything changed. Inside the high-end sports car, Kang Jin-ho leaned back against his seat, his thick arm resting heavily as he processed the sheer shock of what he'd just witnessed. Zeke Esker stood outside in the golden dusk, casually tossing his jacket over his shoulder like he hadn't just shattered the local scaling records.
It couldn't have just been a bunch of kids pulling off damage like that.
Jin-ho's eyes widened behind his lenses, realizing the terrifying implication of a monster kid rising under Zeke's watch. A sudden shout broke the tension from inside the car, leaving Zeke looking completely unbothered.
Wait, don't tell me. You actually went all out against a high school student.
I just gave him a little reality check. Nothing more.
You're a top 10 ranked adventurer, man. Have some mercy on the poor kid.
Zeke simply climbed into the passenger seat without another word, settling in for the ride. Jin-ho rested his chin on his hand, thoughtfully starting up the car while keeping his eyes on the road ahead. Kang Jin-ho adjusted his glasses from the driver's seat, his sharp eyes narrowing as he pondered the sparring match he'd just witnessed.
The younger generation is getting terrifyingly strong. I really need to stay on my toes.
Beside him, Zeke Esker stared straight ahead, completely silent as the car glided down the road. That man behind the wheel wasn't just anyone. He was Kang Jin-ho, South Korea's 19th-ranked black-class adventurer and the leader of NYX. Even so, Jin-ho knew deep down that he still held the advantage over the greenhorns.
Wait, I've never seen this car before. Did you buy another one?
It cost $3.5 billion. And no, don't change the subject.
Meanwhile, back in the research facility's recovery bay, I lay stretched out on an examination table. I bolted upright, gasping as consciousness rushed back all at once. I stared down at my hands in complete disbelief. Every broken bone and aching bruise from the fight had vanished without a trace.
I turned my head to see Jin Saerom standing by the door, completely unbothered.
She casually asked if I actually thought I had a chance against her uncle, bringing in 2 hot mugs.
Her sudden, blunt question caught me completely off guard.
I kept my expression deadpan, admitting I knew I couldn't win, but I still had to give it everything.
Thinking back to Zeke Esker's brutal power, I couldn't help but ponder his absurd combat instincts. Saerom stepped over and handed me one of the steaming cups. She teased that Zeke was just acting like an overprotective uncle, worried about a strange boy around his niece. I took a slow sip, ignoring her teasing to focus on the reality of my strength. Looking into the mug, I had to admit her uncle actually had every right to be cautious.
Saerom gave a dry, sarcastic response, knowing exactly how absurd the whole situation was.
Young Yeoman slid the door open, casually stepping into the medical bay to check on us.
I held up a hand, waving off any more medical treatment since my body already felt completely whole.
Young Yeoman just offered a warm, polite smile as she pulled out a digital tablet. That's when it hit me. Zeke Esker was officially registered as a healer class. He hit like a runaway freight train, yet beating people up wasn't even his main job. A dry, disbelieving smirk cracked across my face. Young Yeoman tapped on her screen to pull up my updated profile evaluation. Jin Saerom leaned in right over my shoulder to check out my official stat breakdown. On paper, my raw potential showed strong ranks in stamina and agility, but my magic score sat at a dismal bottom. Looking closely at those cold metrics, Jin Saerom and I realized just how much sheer effort it would take to bridge the gap with elite high rankers. Young Yeoman's sweat dropped as Saerom snapped over the comms, clearly fed up with her uncle's overprotective antics. The rating standard was simple. B stood for superhuman, C meant excellent, and D was just average. Most average applicants possessed balanced C-rank stamina and agility, suitable for standard track work. Others traded endurance for raw speed, sitting at D-rank stamina, but pushing their agility to a high B. Then there were pure brawlers who built peak rank strength, while leaving their speed at a sluggish D.
Every stat distribution comes with clear trade-offs. Nobody can maximize everything.
Strength, stamina, and agility formed the core balance triangle every fighter strove to optimize. A high-tier candidate was expected to maintain a solid B-rank baseline across all three attributes.
Wait, your stats show Abin's strength and straight A's and everything else. Even in the elite raid department, that puts you on the same level as that monster. What on earth were you expecting?
I stared down at the pad, analyzing how those elite stats were balanced across strength, stamina, and agility. Jin Saerom explained with a proud grin that continuous, bone-grinding effort could actually push past those innate stat limits. Comparing my baseline numbers to the exceptional balance of top-tier prodigies, the sheer gap hit me hard. Yet I knew numbers on a screen couldn't measure intangible variables like battle instinct, skill synergy, and practical experience. Real combat comes down to how deeply you master your weapon under life-or-death pressure. Still, looking at the cold reality of how far I lagged behind true high-rankers like Zeke was a bitter pill to swallow. Saerom gave me a playful wink, reminding me not to lose sleep over high-level monsters. Her sudden cheerfulness caught me completely off guard, making her blush as she looked away. I tapped the screen shut, having seen everything I needed. Standing up, I recommitted to relentless training. I wasn't going to stop until I surpassed every limit in my way.
I stretched out my arm, coming to terms with the fact that I still had an insanely long way to go.
Young Yeoman blinked in utter confusion at my sudden realization. I knew in my heart that my path was bound to clash with the towering legacy of Zeke Esker.
Wait, are you seriously leaving already?
I paused and glanced back at Jin Saerom, wondering what was suddenly bothering her.
There's no way my uncle would ever approve of that either.
Young Yeoman couldn't hold back a quiet giggle seeing Jin Saerom panic like that. Jin Saerom froze, her eyes widening in complete panic. And right on cue, Zeke Esker walked down the hallway, carrying his jacket over his shoulder. He paused with a subtle, knowing grin on his face. Saerom suddenly freaked out and whipped around to look at me, leaving me completely bewildered as to why she was suddenly panicking. She pulled up a digital file explaining ability stats, the numerical caps that define a hunter's innate growth potential and training efficiency. The document laid out the strict minimum stat requirements needed just to earn an official adventurer license in our world. This was the brutal reality of the path I'd chosen, where raw potential meant everything. Warrior High hands out free beginner gear to every fresh student, but honestly, it is little more than cheap plastic and glorified toy props. Take that trash into a real high-tier dungeon, and a single solid hit will shatter your blade into useless splinters. To survive as your body grows stronger, your weapons and armor have to evolve right alongside you.
I scratched my head, figuring I should just be grateful for whatever free equipment they tossed my way.
Saerom whirled around in utter disbelief at my casual attitude.
She stared at me like I had lost my mind for even considering standard-issue junk. Young Yeoman stood beside her, looking just as baffled by my complete lack of concern.
Saerom facepalmed in frustration, blaming herself for not explaining how corporate sponsorships work sooner. She leaned in and insisted that a warrior of my talent needed custom, high-grade equipment from the start.
Big corporations invest millions into promising students, outfitting them with top-tier gear in exchange for future rights. I blinked, slightly caught off guard by how structured this whole high school corporate ecosystem really was.
Young Yeoman waved a hand dismissively with a sheepish grin, stepping up alongside Saerom to set the record straight. She explained that as a Warrior High graduate herself, she knew firsthand how aggressively major sponsors hunt for talent early. I listened intently, realizing just how much clout a top-ranking student carried before even setting foot on a real battlefield.
Saerom turned toward me with a sharp look, reacting as Yeoman laid out the cold, commercial reality of student deals.
Yeoman gave a dry cough and nodded along, admitting that corporations aren't doing any of this out of charity. I tilted my head, wondering what kind of catch came tied to all that free money and high-end gear.
To big companies, students aren't just fighters. They're high-yield investments wrapped in prestigious school uniforms.
Yeoman raised a finger, breaking down the exact terms these corporate suits usually demand from young prospects. They throw open suitcases full of cash, but in return, they claim modeling rights and a fat cut of every dungeon bounty you earn after graduation.
Most students willingly sign away their rights to wealthy corporate sponsors just to secure their future.
Taking that corporate deal gave me a guaranteed job for life, even if it meant giving up my freedom. Anyway, that is what securing a corporate backing actually means when you get into warrior high.
Without proper gear, an adventurer stands no real chance in combat against high-ranking monsters.
I paused, weighing the massive financial burden against my own need for independence.
Custom gear, crafted by elite artisans, could cost more than an entire lifetime of savings. Outside, Zeke Esker relaxed in his red convertible, waiting patiently for our meeting to conclude.
I'll leave you two to head down to the forge on your own. Good luck with the production team down there, Jaryong.
We made our way deep into the facility's lowest levels toward the former dungeon. Jin Saerom hit the elevator button, leading the way down.
I leaned back with my weapon strap loose, asking about the cost.
Don't worry about the funding. I was planning to use my own money anyway.
My eyes sparkled as I dramatically gasped at her generosity.
The indicator dinged as the elevator plunged deep into the facility floor.
We're heading down to the lowest level, where the blacksmith works.
I silently questioned if equipment really made that much of a difference.
As the doors opened, an overwhelming burst of heat washed over us.
I froze, feeling the raw, oppressive presence waiting inside.
Before us lay the underground blacksmith facility, built inside a former dungeon. This scorching underground forge was once known as the Dungeon Boiling Abyss.
So, what do you think of our research facility's blacksmith?
I can tell already, this isn't a place where simple cash gets you a weapon.
Heavy, booming footsteps shook the ground as a giant silhouette stepped out. A single glowing eye locked onto us, making us feel completely microscopic. The air grew suffocatingly heavy in an instant. Instinct took over, and I reached back to firmly grip my sword case.
Zeke has nerve waking me up from my weekend nap, and he didn't even show up himself.
Standing before us was Argeus, a legendary elder titan wearing a lab coat over his massive frame.
Even under his crushing aura, I stared straight back and refused to step down. Don't do anything reckless. He's the head of the entire production department.
Well, she isn't exactly wrong.
A corporate executive and an ancient monster.
From a human perspective, calling me a monster is accurate enough. So, which one of you is the kid Zeke kept talking about? Is it the little guy standing there looking like he's ready to fight?
Or his niece? Anyway, the research division already sent over his battle footage and stat data.
Data, battle footage. I don't give a damn about human numbers. My assistants handle all that paperwork, and none of them came in on a weekend. So whatever files they sent don't mean a thing to me. Since Zeke himself asked me to handle this, I guess we can get down to business. Tell me, kid, is that oversized case you're holding your main weapon? All right then, step up and try to hunt me.
Jin Saerom flinched at the Titan's sudden aggression, while I just stood there processing the sheer absurdity of the test.
I don't know how humans do things, but my people have a rule. No weapon gets forged unless you prove you're worth my blood, sweat, and tears.
Though as his eyes locked onto me, his tone shifted slightly. I didn't hesitate. I shifted my weight, gripping the heavy case tight as a sharp killer instinct flared off my body. eyes honed by real life-or-death hunts. Carrying a raw, restrained hostility that only true battle-hardened veterans ever possess.
You want me to try and beat you? Huh, fair enough.
Jin Saerom froze, her eyes wide with sudden terror as the heavy shadow of the Titan lurched into motion.
He looked down at me through that single, glowing crimson eye, demanding to know if I truly understood what I was stepping into.
Instead of flinching, I drove my stance into the floor, blue aura flaring violently as I drew the staff across my body. Argeus leaned in, his monstrous jaw clenching as he prepared to crush my spirit in an instant. I glared right back into his single eye, my own aura sharpening like a razor-thin blade. The pressure exploded outward in a blinding flash of blue energy that shook the entire underground forge. Saerom gasped, clapping both hands over her mouth as the force of the shockwave washed right over her. The heavy cigar slipped from Argeus's jaw, hitting the stone floor with a quiet, stunned thud.
There was simply no way a kid like me should carry an intent that sharp. Where in the world did a brat like you get a weapon refined like this?
Entering the dungeon raid department meant stepping into a world where standard rules no longer applied. My sharpest thrust slammed into him, but the shockwave bounced right back into my arms, leaving me completely stunned. I knew for a fact my attack hit home, so why did it feel like I just impaled solid steel? Against a monster of that scale, a standard strike isn't just useless, it's practically a suggestion. What stood in front of me wasn't just an opponent, it was an impenetrable wall of sheer physical force. I slid back across the forge floor, staring down the giant non-human master whose sheer defense felt entirely unnatural. I stared at his massive back as the heat radiated around us, wondering what kind of monster could possess defense like this. Behind me, the staff member shrieked in terror, completely overwhelmed by the crushing pressure filling the forge. The silence in the burning room stretched thin as the true reality of threat ranks hung over us. In our world, every monster is assigned a star danger rank to measure the threat they pose to human life. Even a basic one-star threat like a mantis fly is officially classified as a creature fully capable of killing a human. A basic one-star threat is simple enough that an average adult with a club can usually beat it. Then you hit two-star rank, where multiple lethal beasts swarm together in deadly packs. At that point, standard military squads with automatic rifles are called in to handle the threat. By three-star rank, you run into giant creatures capable of tearing down entire urban blocks. Taking those down requires heavy tactical artillery and armored military corps. Four-star beasts are nightmare-flying abominations that stalk high-rises and cause mass panic. Ground forces can't even fight them directly. Their only order is to pull civilians out of the fire. The military has to resort to carpet bombing and long-range airstrikes just to sanitize the area. Because 4 stars is the absolute limit of what conventional human armies can survive. Anything 5 stars or above, regular weapons are useless. Leveling a whole city block with heavy artillery just to bring down one monster isn't a victory, it's a catastrophe. Which is why when something that dangerous shows up, they don't call the army, they send in elite adventurer strike squads.
Hey, didn't I ask you a question, kid?
And Argeus wasn't just any monster, he was a former 7-star threat.
Where did you get that weapon from?
I held my ground, asking why he cared so much about my spear.
I suggest you think very carefully about your next answer. Because I made that weapon myself. So let me ask you one last time. He demanded to know why his custom creation was in my hands, instead of the warrior he forged it for.
If Argeus forged that weapon himself, it had to be ranked at least A+.
A masterpiece like that should have been logged in the official association database the second it left the anvil. It wasn't something a black market smuggler could just stumble across.
Did he steal it, or could it be something far worse?
Instead of cowering under the giant's gaze, I just let out a cold, quiet smirk. Yeoman panicked and called me an idiot, but I already knew what I had to do.
The Titan grunted, declaring he'd entertain my challenge.
Argeus lunged forward, his massive fist glowing with crushing aura right above me. Death flashed right before my eyes. Evading this monster was completely impossible. A massive surge of crimson aura erupted as Argeus bore down on me with terrifying pressure, directly blocking a blow that is pure suicide, like trying to stop a needle by shoving it into a mountain. If I took his strike head-on, I'd end up broken on the floor in seconds. So I planted my foot and prepared to execute the final secret technique. The exact redirection technique I had stolen from watching my father, Yoo Seong. Argeus's eyes widened as he realized his massive swing was slipping wide. With a blinding flash, I parried his crushing blow right off course. It was like throwing a runaway truck off track just before impact. Gritting my teeth, I didn't stop at just deflecting his strike. I redirected his overwhelming momentum and aimed my counter straight for his vulnerable eyes. Argeus realizes too late that the direction of his kinetic strike can actually be redirected. With a sharp twist of my weapon, I pivot my entire body to complete the parry.
Did he seriously just parry a raw attack from a 7-star monster?
The only viable opening on this Titan's body is his single central eye. I dart forward at full velocity, driving my weapon straight toward his face. Argeus looms over me, unmoving and unfazed as I lock into position. I grit my teeth against the crushing pressure, refusing to back down an inch.
He certainly looks plenty suspicious in your eyes as well, doesn't he?
Young Yeoman glares right back at him, unawed by his massive frame.
Unless you are in personal danger, naturalized species are strictly forbidden from harming humans.
Yeoman's voice is dead serious as she reminds the Titan that breaking the non-aggression pact means forfeiting his naturalized status, instantly turning him back into an officially hunted monster.
Don't worry, I understand the rules completely.
While Yeoman checks on Misi, sit catch my breath on the floor, Argeus stares down at us, his hostility completely evaporating. Out of nowhere, Argeus admits that he finally realizes why I have that weapon in my hands.
Zeke, so that's why he woke me from my sleep to meet this kid. Allow me to apologize. You actually have every right to carry that weapon.
He snags his cigar straight between his fingers and snaps it effortlessly in half.
Just now, it's been 30 years since the last time anyone managed to land an injury on me.
Yeoman and I just stare at each other in utter confusion. What on earth is this giant talking about?
Do you want to know why I agreed to work for you humans in the first place?
Yeoman cut in, asking if he ended up working for humans because the Gibeok attack squad hunted him down 30 years ago.
Argeus just puffed on his cigar and sneered, claiming those fools couldn't even lay a finger on him.
Yeoman and I froze as the Titan revealed that his true hunter wasn't an army at all, but just a single man.
He pointed toward his mechanical arm, admitting that warrior sliced off his original limb and chose to spare his life. Then Argeus locked eyes with me, his gaze burning right through my soul.
He recalled the blazing inferno of that legendary battle from 30 years past. A lone swordsman had charged into the fire, shattering Argeus's unstoppable defense with sheer force. Standing amidst the blue embers was the monstrous hero holding a massive battle axe.
The warrior who humbled the 7-star Titan was my father, Yoo Seong.
The heavy truth settled over the underground forge as the past finally caught up to the present. Long before humans carved out their place in this world, there were the Elder Titans. They weren't just big, they were the absolute peak of the giant races. With near-immortal lifespans, only 10 of these absolute monsters were ever known to exist on Earth. Their sheer raw physical power was already way beyond human understanding. A glowing hammer hits the anvil, sparking hot iron in the dark. But what truly made them terrifying was their mastercraft. They could forge legendary weapons and artifacts bound with incomprehensible magic. With one heavy strike, the metal absorbs immense power. It was a gift every single Elder Titan carried in their very blood. The only other race that came anywhere close to that level of crafting were the dwarves. Unlike the Titans who kept to their own dark corners of the world, another race made a very different choice. The dwarves chose to walk among humans, forging bonds and shaking hands with our leaders. That peaceful coexistence didn't mean the world stopped burning. 30 years ago, deep underground, a strike team was staring right into the mouth of hell. The Gibeuk attack squad had breached the dungeon for the Argeus subjugation operation, but everything was going horribly wrong. Standing before them was Colossus B, an automated doll crafted by Argeus, built for pure, lethal efficiency.
Communications are completely dead. We can't reach headquarters at all.
Something in this cavern is jamming our signal. Brace yourselves. It's coming right now.
The construct lunged with crushing force, splitting the very air as it crashed down on them. Park Jeongmin planted his boots and absorbed the full brunt of the blow, his armor screaming under the pressure. A blinding flash of lightning split the dark, tearing through the underground cavern. Park Jeongmin leapt directly into the creature's path, channeling everything he had left into a desperate airborne strike. His eyes flared with raw energy, throwing his entire life on the line for one single hit. He slammed his weapon down with absolute force, detonating a massive shockwave across the Titan construct's face. Oh Seung could only watch in total terror as her team leader sacrificed himself. The strike shattered the monster's visor, but the construct barely even staggered. With his energy completely drained by potential trigger, Park Jeongmin collapsed, utterly helpless. The behemoth smashed Park Jeongmin aside, turning its cold gaze onto the rest of Team 9.
This is completely impossible.
Team 9 had been top-tier elites, but against Argeus's creations, they were nothing. Oh Seung slumped against a stone pillar, gasping for air as fresh blood dripped down her chin. Before she could even catch her breath, another metallic construct loomed over her with glowing blue eyes. Even if they managed to destroy one, another relentless Titan construct stepped up to take its place.
If the main attack squad is catching this same nightmare, none of us are making it out alive.
Suddenly, a shadow stepped past her, radiating an undeniable surge of power. With glowing eyes and a calm smile, the unknown volunteer turned toward the oncoming threat. The heavy construct lunged forward, swinging its massive blade to crush the newcomer. Team leader Park Jeongmin braced himself behind his shield, activating his ultimate emergency skill, Potential Trigger. The ability force-drained all remaining mana to multiply physical strength beyond human limits. The fatal catch: once the power ran out, the user would be completely incapacitated.
With everything I had left, I slammed my shield forward into the construct.
The titanic shield hit the monster with explosive force, locking the construct in place.
Team leader, if you use Potential Trigger now, you'll destroy yourself.
I know, but I can hold him off just long enough for you two to get out alive.
Park Jeongmin offered a gentle smile, accepting the terrible price of his final sacrifice. Then, footsteps echoed through the cavern smoke.
What is this? Are there still bugs crawling around in my sanctuary?
The massive red-skinned Titan loomed over them, radiating overwhelming heat and malice.
Run! Get out of here right now.
Park Jeongmin charged blindly into the beast's path, raising his shield for one last stand.
If I can just draw its attention directly, I'll buy them enough time to escape.
The doll swung its fiery blade downward, engulfing Park Jeongmin in a blinding inferno. A dark, silent shadow loomed through the fire, completely untouched by the sacrificial attack.
Inferior. Your pathetic gear and weak bodies are nothing but absolute trash. There isn't a single thing about your kind that isn't completely worthless. If beings like you claim this world, then it's already doomed.
The giant construct paused, tilting its head in sudden confusion as a strange presence approached. Behind the fallen leader, the last remaining squad member stood trembling uncontrollably in sheer terror.
Argeus mocks Kim Youngmo's loyalty, taunting that his brave stand is utterly meaningless.
A towering green-skinned construct steps forward beside the giant monster, casting a terrifying shadow over the trembling survivor.
Tears stream down my face as I tremble in absolute horror, knowing I stand no chance against a monster that broke our leader.
Heavy breathing echoes through the smoke as a shirtless man stands tall right beside him.
Yoo Seong catches his breath, dryly questioning the point of clearing a dungeon if everyone dies anyway, shocking Kim Youngmo. Kim Youngmo stares up in utter shock, completely unable to process who just stepped out of the haze. At 32 years old, Yoo Seong simply introduces himself as one of the dungeon volunteers.
Yoo Seong scratches his head casually, while Kim Youngmo frantically looks around for any other survivors. The horned construct narrows its glowing eyes, silently evaluating the strange, unbothered newcomer.
Yoo Seong casually mentions he's the only volunteer who made it this far, right as the construct surges forward in a sudden blinding strike.
My father dodged the giant's opening swing with a razor-thin margin. The heavy strike slammed into the stone hall with a deafening metallic crash.
Kim Youngmo could only stare in total shock, as my father treated the nightmare like a mild inconvenience.
Back then, Yoo Seong was just an unknown volunteer who cared more about surviving than chasing fame. The heavy construct lurched forward again, intent on crushing him into dust. Instead of backing down, my father unleashed a surge of brilliant blue aura. The automated monster charged straight into the light, shield raised. And right there in the dark dungeon, my father's legendary story officially began. He swung his weapon, splitting the cavern air with pure power. A single brutal strike cleaved the massive construct clean down the center. Even the monstrous creature froze, realizing something fundamental in the air had shifted.
Looking past the wreckage, I locked eyes with the second beast and smirked. This one might actually take a few extra seconds.
And right there, amidst the blood and dungeon dust, my father's legendary story truly began. A blinding surge of power tore through the dark chamber, obliterating the constructs in a single instant.
No way. It took our entire squad just to hold one off, but he destroyed them like they were nothing.
The colossal automated titan collapsed onto the cold stone floor, utterly defeated. My father stood tall amidst the smoke, barely catching his breath after taking down the swarm alone.
Who are you?
How does a mere human possess such absurd, devastating power?
Oh Seung slumped against a stone pillar, bleeding and exhausted, but still alive.
They're still breathing. We actually survived.
You tell me to fall back, after showing me a force like that.
Standing before a creature that had annihilated elite squads, my father didn't yield an inch.
You talk with such confidence, human, as if you actually plan on leaving this place alive.
Of course I am, because I'm not letting anyone else die today.
Argeus glared down, his single eye narrowing as he realized this was no ordinary warrior. A wall of infernal flames erupted as the Titan unleashed his full, crushing wrath. My father gathered his aura, condensing blue energy around his fist. With explosive speed, he surged directly through the inferno. A single precise stroke sliced through the flames, parting the energy clean. He met the Titan's attack head-on, deflecting the immense force with effortless grace. Kim Youngmo stood frozen in awe, barely able to process the godlike power unfolding right before him. My father pushed his body to the absolute limit every single day, building the foundation of a monster. He relied solely on standard, unchanted equipment that offered no magical assistance. With sheer technique and raw aura, he shattered the Titan's constructs into worthless scrap. He dominated the battlefield, turning Argeus's unstoppable army into falling debris. Elder Titan Argeus stared down at the human in complete, utter disbelief. My father took his stance, ready to deliver the final strike. Argeus threw a desperate, crushing blow with all the force he had left. Yoo Seong met the blow head-on, completely overpowering the Titan in a single flash.
He actually beat the Elder Titan.
You are different from the rest. You truly know how to wield the power given to you. My father stood his ground, sweat pouring down his face as he gripped his worn battle axe.
The glowing edge of the blade had taken hit after hit, straining under the immense pressure. Yet even as his lungs burned, a confident smirk flickered across my father's face. He glanced back toward the exit, ensuring the surviving squad members had made it to safety. In an instant, his eyes widened as Argeus launched forward with crushing speed. The Elder Titan brought down a devastating strike, sending a wave of blazing energy through the hall.
Argeus admitted that my father's redirection technique was unlike anything he had ever seen from a human warrior. But he pointed out that the cheap axe couldn't possibly withstand the sheer force of their clash. Cracks began spiderwebbing across the metal shaft, right before my father's eyes. Raising his massive fiery weapon, Argeus declared that this would be the final blow.
Instead of backing off, my father absorbed the Titan's fiery strike straight on.
He didn't redirect it, he blocked it head-on.
That was the moment the legendary skill, Swell, was born. He absorbed the full weight of the blow, redirecting that massive kinetic power right back into his enemy. Argeus could only watch in terror as his own overwhelming force came flying straight back at him. It wasn't just power, it was flawless execution from a warrior on a completely different plane. A single counterstrike shattered the Titan's defense once and for all. The mighty Elder Titan was sent crashing down into the dust. And just like that, 30 years ago, a single volunteer cleared an impossible dungeon and rewrote history.
Well, I'm sure this story is pretty well known among humans. Everyone assumed the grand story ended right there, when the hero struck down the monster.
My father unleashed a blinding surge of redirected energy in one final, overwhelming strike. The force tore through the entire chamber, shattering the Titan's unstoppable defenses in an instant. Argeus put out his burning cigar against the stone ground, accepting his absolute defeat.
The moment I lost, my life belonged to your father, but he chose to spare me.
The impossible raid that wiped out elite squads was ended by one lone man. Yoo Seong stood victoriously over the fallen Titan, though the true history began right after. Elder Titans are proud beings that would rather die than bow to anyone they consider inferior. Yet Argeus broke tradition, binding himself in chains and requesting self-imposed exile among humans.
I remember reading about that event. The entire world was completely shocked by his surrender.
Because he didn't take a single human life during the whole rampage, human authorities eventually granted him official citizenship. He even received a proper identification card, mostly because his hands were completely clean of blood. To pay off his heavy debt to society, Argeus was assigned to work right here in the research forge.
Wait, a single warrior cleared the entire Argeus dungeon alone. That's completely different from what they taught us in school. That staff you're holding right now, I forged it specifically to honor him. Your father never asked me for anything, but I decided he was the only man worthy of wielding it.
I stared at the heavy iron rod in my hands, remembering how the debt collectors ignored it back home because it seemed worthless.
Well, you're not wrong. A situs now, it's only good for hitting things with blunt force. Debt collectors. It's pretty simple. You should already know what it really is, shouldn't you? Argeus looked at me sharply and asked if my father ever actually fought with a plain staff. He explained he originally planned to forge a massive battle axe once my father brought the core blade material. But before that could happen, my father succumbed to the dragon blood poison and fell bedridden. Unable to leave the forge himself, Argeus sent the unfinished shaft to our home, where I found Itasa child. He sighed heavily, admitting he thought he would never get the chance to complete the weapon.
Then the giant extended his massive hand toward me. I held out the staff and told him to give me the incomplete weapon so I could finish what started.
Argeus promised to finish the weapon himself right then and there. He declared he would forge a masterpiece, not for my father, but tailored specifically for me.
With my father's legacy in hand, my true path in the dungeon raid department was about to begin. The elevator chimes as we step out into the quiet hallway. Jin Saerom walks beside me, silently taking in everything we just learned.
How are you holding up after hearing all that?
I scratch my neck, trying to process the truth about my father's past. Back in the forge, heat radiates from the glowing hearth.
I'll craft this blade for you, but it won't happen overnight. Be patient. True masterpieces take time and precision.
We part ways as night falls over the city.
Wednesday is a holiday. Want to study for the written exams together.
I stretch my arms and agree. A study session sounds fine by me. I paused under the cool night sky, letting the heavy truth about my father sink in.
Saerom twirled a lock of hair, still trying to wrap her head around the fact that my dad was the real force behind that legendary raid.
I turned back to her, needing space to digest everything Argeus had just revealed. I waved her off gently, telling her I needed to walk alone for a bit, leaving her blinking in surprise. Night settled deep over the city skyline as high-rises glittered under the dark sky. A sleek black luxury car sped down the empty highway, carrying Saerom back home. Sitting in the back, she pulled out her phone to pull up the official archives on the Boiling Abyss incident.
Staring at the screen, she realized the public record credited 5 famous squad leaders, but completely erased my father.
Those 5 adventurers were revered as national heroes, yet the entire history had been fabricated to steal one man's glory.
It made her stomach turn. Argeus had no reason to lie, meaning the world standard history was nothing but a lie.
Considering how absurd my own combat strength was, it made total sense that my father was an absolute monster in his prime.
History gets twisted inside dungeons all the time. Wait, the official file on the fake dragon slayer Yoo Seong.
The public records admitted he was once recognized as Korea's top-tier adventurer. A warrior who stood battered and bloodied on the front lines, carrying every raid on his back.
They wrote off all his feats as fraud and coercion. Wait, this doesn't add up at all.
The official report claimed Argeus was defeated by the entire Gibeuk squad, branding my father a liar who stole credit.
How could this be? Was Jaryong's father framed by the entire system?
Before she could dig deeper, a sudden notification popped up. The second semester midterm practical scores were finally live. Over at Warrior High's Dungeon Raid Department faculty room, the teachers were wrapping up their late-night grading.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Kang. You had to work through the entire weekend because of my class evaluations.
I held the finalized test scores in my hands, shuffling the papers as the practical results settled.
Cho Sia slumped back in her office chair, letting out a heavy sigh after hours of grading. Who would have guessed that the top spot in the practical exams would go to that half-elf kid?
It certainly wasn't an outcome anyone could have easily predicted.
Despite his incredible practical scores, Tir Velkason stared at his phone in sheer horror. His combat power was undeniable, blue spirit flame wrapping around his training blade with ease. He possessed devastating physical strength and high mana, yet social interaction totally paralyzed him. Inheriting intense mana traits from his mother Seok Yubin, his power boiled over effortlessly. Even as a half-blood, his mana pool and control far surpassed most full-blooded elves. And third, his sheer physical presence was enough to leave ordinary people completely stunned. A massive frame walking through the city streets, carrying the physical perfection of a warrior with none of the usual elf weaknesses. Tir Velkason, known here in Korea as Seok Cheolking.
He really is an incredible student. Isn't the top spot in practical exams usually fought over by the two major student factions?
Kang Young-suk quietly takes a sip of his hot tea.
Honestly, that's why I'm worried about him. I just wish he'd open up a bit more.
In the classroom, Cheol-kang sits completely frozen at his desk, staring straight ahead in silence. Whispering classmates glance back at him, treating him like an outcast.
Don't worry too much about him. There are plenty of times things are happening under the surface that we don't notice.
She admitted that while there is really no limit to how much a teacher worries about their students, his case felt entirely different.
Kang Young-suk just listened with a calm, understanding smile, knowing every kid has their own pace.
Out in the city, the bright afternoon sun washed over the busy shopping street, filled with food stalls and shops. Two students were walking along laughing, completely enjoying their day off. Suddenly, one of them turned into a towering figure and spilled his drink everywhere. He whipped around ready to snap at whoever bumped into him, only to find himself staring straight into the chest of an absolute giant.
Tir Velkason opened his mouth, trying to squeeze out an apology before things got awkward.
The two kids instantly froze in place, utterly terrified by how intimidating he looked towering over them. That sent him straight into a full-blown panic, flailing his hands desperately to show he meant no harm. Cheol-kang stared down at his freshly stained shirt, the realization sinking in with horrifying clarity.
Why am I always this ridiculously unlucky? Is tteokbokki really that good, Mom?
Of course it is. I just wish I could cook it for you, but you know your mom can't cook to save her life.
His mother, Seok Yubin, was a legendary hero across Northern Europe, but at home, she was just a mom sharing stories of her homeland. Those quiet meals together filled his childhood with warm tales of a distant country. And through her words, Cheol-kang grew up admiring Korea and its people long before he ever set foot there. With his incredible natural talent and lineage, transferring into the academy should have been a dream come true. He passed the special transfer exam without breaking a sweat, stepping into the school looking like an absolute powerhouse. Except, the guy was an absolute social train wreck. Deep down, he desperately wanted to reach out and make friends like everyone else. His Korean was fluent, but the crippling fear that they'd laugh at his accent paralyzed him. Because when you're an extreme introvert, speaking a foreign language to strangers is practically a death sentence. Every time someone walked past, he'd freeze up and curse his own awkwardness. His intimidating aura was so overwhelming that classmates actually bowed and apologized just for talking too loud around him, which left him completely bewildered as the entire first semester slipped away without making a single friend. And just like that, the class top ranker became a total lone wolf, completely against his will. Then one afternoon, his eyes caught a glowing neon sign down the street. A local PC bang, the iconic spot his mother had told him all about.
Back in my school days, we'd hit the PC bang after class, play games, and order mountains of delicious food.
The quiet hum of computers filled the empty aisles of the local PC bang.
How in the world do you operate this machine?
He kept jabbing blindly at the touchscreen, sweating profusely under the sheer pressure of a basic UI. Behind him, the growing line of impatient customers grumbled softly under their breath.
I'll just leave. There's no point being here alone anyway.
You only charge your account at that kiosk. Tir Velkason turned, utterly stunned that someone had spoken to him so casually. Follow me, I'll show you how to register. A simple offer of help, bridging the gap between two very different worlds. I leaned over Seok Cheol-kang's shoulder at the internet cafe kiosk, watching him freeze up completely before the login screen.
Without missing a beat, I reached down and took over his mouse to fill out the form for him. I told him not to worry about it as he stepped back. He definitely spoke Korean, but watching an elite half-elf struggle this hard with a simple computer felt almost unreal. Checking my phone, I saw Jin Saerom's frantic text messages apologizing for running so late. If I had known she would leave me hanging like this, I would have gone straight to the black market instead. My mind drifted back to the strange, smooth black stone I'd recovered earlier.
I am Yiwen had handed it over right, alongside the chest, filled with royal jelly.
It felt remarkably polished, though whatever it was, it certainly wasn't meant to be eaten. I needed to get these loot items appraised later, but I knew better than to sell anything tied to the Imperial Wasp right now. If I ever ran short on cash, though, Enkil's blood was the one asset I could turn into an instant fortune.
Enkil was notorious as one of the 3 great disaster beasts looming inside the Igor jungles. They called it the Tyrant of the Land, a massive, monstrous serpent that ruled the abyss. Countless elite attack squads were dispatched into the wild to hunt the beast down, only to be utterly butchered. It slithered through the aftermath like a mountain of dark scales and glowing red eyes, virtually untouchable. Its towering bulk dwarfed entire human raid teams, leaving survivor bodies scattered like broken toys in its wake. Not a single raid group in history ever succeeded in subjugating the monster. The absolute best hunters ever managed was chipping off a few loose scales and harvesting a tiny sample of its blood. When the government finally banned all hunts, anything linked to Enkil became priceless beyond imagination. I took a quiet moment to consider my next move.
I was supposed to grab lunch with Jin Saerom before checking out the black market tonight, but her sudden absence threw off my entire schedule.
Excuse me, but it looks like there aren't any other open seats around here.
Go ahead and sit down. I don't have anyone else coming today anyway.
He quickly typed in his login credentials to get set up.
There really aren't any special games here. Honestly, my setup back home has way better specs.
Is that so?
Wait. You're around the exact same rank as me too. If you want.
Let's team up.
Beyond the safe zones of our world lies a brutal reality. Entire sectors sit ruined, branded as scars from the catastrophic dimension collisions. Giant beasts invaded back then, razing entire cities to ash before they could be checked. While major cities were rebuilt, the border lands right next to the dungeons were completely abandoned. Massive protective walls now isolate the populated centers from these lawless ruined zones. If monsters ever breach the inner gate, those empty buffer zones serve as our second line of defense. For 20 years, that wall held, until today. At the perimeter gate, guards clear heavy security transports moving back and forth from the dungeon border. The heavy reinforced iron gates slowly swing open to clear the transport's path. A armored monster transport vehicle rolls past security control into the buffer zone.
Driving through these high-risk containment zones always makes my skin crawl.
You're complaining again, Changwoo, while I'm stuck sitting here doing nothing.
That's Jo Yina, a former gold-class adventurer who had to retire to special operations after losing her eye. And driving us is Sun Changwoo, a former bronze-class operator who nervous sweats through every single shift.
Just focus on the road and keep us on schedule. I've heard enough whining for one morning.
A sudden, violent thump shuddered through the entire chassis from the cargo hold.
What on earth was that sound? Don't tell me one of the monsters in the back broke out of its cell.
Pull over now. Tell dispatch we're stopping to inspect the cargo bay.
Armed with a blade, Jo Yina cautiously stepped up to inspect the side of the truck.
She ordered me to pull over so we could check the vehicle. I kept worrying something went wrong, but if not for her past injury, Jo Yina could have easily been a top-tier ranker.
Suddenly, the driver's side door clicked and swung wide open.
Wait, you're back already.
Don't worry, it was nothing.
Below the vehicle, the original operator lay motionless in a pool of blood. The intruder wiped her bloody neck, wearing a sinister smirk as she took control of the system.
What in the world are you doing?
Her eyes glowed an eerie red as she initiated the transport drive. A heavy silence fell right before the final match commenced. And just like that, our screen flashed with a brilliant blue victory emblem. I turned to Seok Cheolking, watching him nod along in complete satisfaction while devouring his noodles.
It turned out he wasn't just quiet. He was an absolute beast at gaming. I asked if he attended school around here, and he gave a subtle, bashful nod.
Before we could talk any further, a violent rumble shook the entire building beneath our feet. Panicked cries erupted across the internet cafe as people scrambled to figure out if it was an earthquake. I turned my head toward the entrance, my instincts telling me this wasn't a natural tremor. Outside the front doors, the noise echoed down the street. Bystanders recorded the scene in disbelief as a massive transport truck crashed directly into a building facade. Bystanders raised their phones to film the wreckage, completely oblivious to the real danger brewing inside. High above the crash site, Jo Yina stood on a rooftop, casually chatting on her phone about the operation.
Looks like the spectacle is starting a bit early.
Down below, a deep slice tore straight through the heavy metal roof of the transport container. A razor-sharp claw burst through the tier, shredding the metal like paper. The crowd froze in absolute horror as the heavy metal doors tore completely off. Out stepped a massive, muscular horned horror, its glowing red eyes scanning the helpless crowd. These beasts grow deadlier with every horn they sprout, and this one was built for wholesale slaughter. Watching from above, Jo Yina smirked, thoroughly enjoying the chaos unfolding beneath her.
If I don't step in right now, dozens of people are going to die.
She actually smirked, watching the bloodthirsty beast carve into the street below like it was cheap weekend entertainment. I bet those horned horrors tear through at least 100 civilians before any emergency squad even shows up.
Down on the pavement, total panic erupted as people tripped and trampled over each other trying to escape. A young boy stumbled to the ground, crying out as a shadow loomed right over him. The beast let out a gut-wrenching roar, cornering helpless bystanders who could only freeze in place.
Not on my watch. I dropped straight from above, blue mana exploding around me like a meteor into the middle of the street. I swung my momentum into a devastating arc, channeling raw aura into a single strike. And I slammed my kick straight into the creature's skull before it could take a single life.
The battle for the city district was officially underway. Panicked civilians stared in absolute horror as chaos erupted all over the street. I dropped directly onto the pavement in front of them, stepping in before anyone else could get killed. I glanced over my shoulder, keeping my cool while assessing the immediate danger. The people behind me were shaking violently, completely frozen by the crushing pressure of the beast. I locked my eyes forward, calculating my move before the monster could lung at anyone else. A horned horror was writhing on the ground, a rank 4 threat fresh out of the containment breach. Though honestly, single-horned variants aren't exactly rocket science to take down. My focus sharpened to a razor edge, watching every twitch of its muscular limbs. Suddenly, a whole motorcycle came flying right above my head in a sudden blast. I ducked low and braced myself on the asphalt as the bike slammed hard into the road. I let out a dry laugh as the dust settled. Right on cue, a horned horror dropped straight out of the sky, lunging right for my throat. It didn't give me a single second to catch my breath. So I swung around and planted a mana-infused kick straight into its ugly face. As it crashed to the ground, I eyed its posture and remembered their biology. These rank 4 beasts usually live short, aggressive lives in the dungeons. To compensate, their bodies adapt under stress to push past normal limits. Suddenly, a furious wave of energy exploded straight upward from its body. It stood back up, hulking and completely enraged, pulsing with raw power. They're fast, strong, and terrifying, but still nothing I can't handle. I knew right then that if it came down to a fight, I'd have to take them out myself. My legs braced against the pavement, setting my stance as the tension peaked. Channeling pure aura, I visualized the immense physical power of my father surge through my body. I brought up my status window only to confirm what I already feared. Every single gear slot was completely empty. If only I'd brought along the high-grade gear I keep for my illegal dungeon runs. Before I could finish the thought, a shadowy beast lunged right past me at lightning speed. I flipped backward through the air, dodging as the monster slammed into the street and shattered the pavement. I hit the ground sliding, my fingers digging into the concrete to absorb the momentum. Emerging from the dust cloud stood a horned horror, a rank 4 threat with lethal 2-horned claws. I locked eyes with the beast, focusing every ounce of my concentration on its movement. A broken sign lay smashed in the street dirt, useless as the panic kept spreading. I stomped right onto the sign, planting my foot firmly to set my pivot. Grabbing a discarded metal pipe off the ground, I braced myself for the incoming charge. The horned horror leapt through the air, claws extended right toward me. Mana burst outward in a sharp ring as I channeled my energy directly into the makeshift weapon. I dropped low, letting blue aura coat the metal pole as the beast fell right into my range. I tightened my grip, surging pure mana through the steel until it hummed. With one swift stroke, I swung upward with enough force to launch the monster off its feet. The force flipped the beast completely upside down, sending it crashing backward into the asphalt. Honestly, for a rank 4 threat, its attacks were almost painfully easy to read. A massive shockwave ripped through the air as my strike connected, blowing back the surrounding dust and catching the crowd off guard. The bystanders froze in absolute terror, trembling violently as they realized a second horned horror was already swooping down on them. The beast lunged forward with razor-sharp claws extended, salivating at the helpless targets right in front of it. It plummeted from the night sky like a heavy meteor, aiming to crush the trapped civilians on the sidewalk. I darted across the pavement in a blur, clearing the distance in less than a heartbeat. Dark monster blood dripped onto the stone pavement below. The horned horror growled in fury, snarling with wide red eyes as it tried to force its claw downward. I caught its massive fist barehanded, wrapping my mana-infused palm tightly around its giant knuckles. Holding a rank 4 beast above my head with one arm, I didn't budge an inch. I gritted my teeth and threw a powerful counterstrike, sending the creature hurtling through the air. Only those who had pushed their physical limits to the absolute pinnacle could pull off what I was doing right now. The beast leaped off the wall, diving straight down with lethal velocity. Tir Velkason watched from the side, convinced no one could damage a rank 4 threat without high-level gear. The monster lunged forward, opening its jaw wide to snap me in half. "Where the hell do you think you're looking?" I thrust the pole straight into its sternum, puncturing its thick hide with pure aura pressure. Tir Velkason froze, his eyes wide as he tried to process what he just saw. The massive creature crashed onto the pavement, dark blood pooling from the hole in its chest. I lowered my weapon casually, barely breaking a sweat after wiping out the threat. A heavy impact shuddered down the street, forcing both a fusto turn toward the new danger. A massive explosion tore through the upper floors of the commercial strip, showering sparks down onto the street. The blast slammed directly into the pavement below, shattering concrete into jagged rubble. I swallowed hard as I looked over the wreckage, realizing just how much damage these beasts caused in under a minute. Official rescue squads were still minutes away, leaving the entire street completely exposed. Tir Velkason froze with his phone gripped tight, staring blankly as the reality of the situation sank in. He tried to speak, his voice trembling as he realized he was completely out of his depth. A armored vanguard warrior let out a wild war cry, powering up his mana to draw the beasts toward himself. I clenched my fist tightly, feeling the familiar surge of raw energy coiling in my knuckles. I turned back to Tir Velkason and gave him a clear order to get every civilian safely inside the building. I remembered his sharp instincts back at the cafe when he was scarfing down noodles, and I knew he had what it took to handle the crowd. Tir Velkason froze, staring back at me like he couldn't believe what I was about to attempt. I held the broken metal pipe loosely in one hand, completely composed. He flailed his arms, frantically trying to stop me from rushing back toward a swarm of rank 4 monsters completely unarmed. You're pretty good at games, especially when it comes to protecting others. I never intended to play the selfless hero, but standing here without my dungeon gear, I could still feel my father's legendary legacy burning inside me. If I was going to do this, I had to give it everything I had.
We don't have time to chat like this.
I slung the metal rod over my shoulder, ready to step back out and hold the line. The battle was only just beginning. Subscribe to see what happens next in the story.